You know what they say, guys? The the biggest smiles hide the deepest pain. You know why I say that? It's because I have a little bit of a tummy ache. Just a little, I've got a little bit of a tummy ache. It hurts. You're being very brave about it. Thank you. You know, it's really one of those things you don't expect to carry forward into adulthood. You know what I mean? Isn't it wild? Like there are like 50-year-old like businessmen and they're just sitting there and they're like, I've got a tummy ache. It's like it's such a fundamentally juvenile uh you know what I mean? Um yeah, stummy hurt. Um God. I'm gonna send the Zoom link to Kyle Kulinski in just a minute. We're gonna have a good conversation. Any of you who are expecting a debate are going to be very disappointed. However, there are plenty of things that I want to talk about with Kyle Kulinski. Um, really funny rhetorician. Okay, that tracks. Nice. That guy's just stupid enough for that to work. Actually, I think the reason my stomach hurt is because I had to wake up at 6 a.m. I had a 7 a.m. Interview today on one of Al Jazeera's programs. Um, it was 10 a.m. EST when they recorded it, and that is, of course, 7 a.m. PST. Um, so that was fun. And when do we get to see it? They should be uploading it pretty soon, I think. I recorded it on my end too, so you know. Um, yeah. Anyway, we'll be talking to Kyle. After that, there's plenty of stuff to talk about. We have to talk about the Twitter space race war. That should be fun. Where can we watch the interview? I'll make it known. Don't worry, I'll make it known. No, Will from PA. I'm absolutely not going to ask him that. My goodness. All right, hold on. Yes, the space race war. Yeah, very important topics. We've got to ask about old Kyle Kulinski tweets, stuff like that. By the way, a chatter got a viral tweet. Okay, I'm gonna be real. Josh underscore 395. I love you. However, I've seen this image go viral like 18 times. Okay, is this the Fourth Reich just being shown this image over and over again? I swear to God, I've seen this image get like 50K or so likes like a ton of times, and it's still funny. Don't get me wrong. It's just oh wait, hold on. I need to readjust the screen because I stretched it for the recording. Transform, stretch the screen. There we go. There we go. It is still funny though. It is still funny. All right, just a second. Did you get hurt on your neck? I see something. Did I get what's on my neck? What's on my neck? Hair? I shaved last night. Uh, yeah, yeah. Oh, for a moment it looked like a bruise. No, I just have a single unbroken line of hair going from my neck hair to my chest hair. Like, see? It's like I just arbitrarily decide to cut it off right here, you know. Average Vosh hater, funny rhetorician. All right. Okay, hold on. New meeting. That shirt is sick. Oh, thank you. Okay, new meeting. Now, invite person. Invite. Copy invite link. Secular talk. There we go. That feels about right. Now if I click on this, and then it does that, and then okay, cool. Now we wait. There we go. Hello? Hello, hello? Uh-oh, I can't hear you. Hold on, let me see. audio. You can hear me. Not if you can hear me. I don't see any nodding. Okay. Wait, let me message you. I think it's on your end because it's showing me that I'm making audio. I can't hear you.
Hey, buddy, I'm here. I hear you.
Hello.
Hey, do you hear me through the Yeti microphone or my shitty laptop microphone?
No, that's the Yeti.
Oh, okay, cool. Great.
Hello.
What's up, dude? How's it going, man?
It's going good. It's the man himself. Let me click on that. There we go. It's delightful to have you on.
It's great to talk to you. I could say it's the man himself right back to you.
There we go. All right, you're in the corner now. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
We've been in each other's orbit for a while. So I'm surprised it took so long, but I'm really bad at getting back to messages, so that's probably on me.
Yeah, well, I'm also just generally a very considering what we do. I'm a pretty private person and a pretty introverted person, and I don't really do too many collaborations. I mean, obviously with Crystal Kyle and Friends, we have people come on that show, but generally speaking, Crystal handles like 90% of the talking to other people and setting it up, and I just sort of show up and do my thing. So it's rare just on my end. I mean, I know you're always talking to everybody under the sun.
Oh yeah, but I hate it. I hate scheduling things. No. When they're on the call, I love it. But the whole like the are you free at this time? It feels like professional behavior, very much out of my league. I put my pants on 2 minutes before turning the camera on. The scheduling is not my forte.
You and me both, man. You and me both do the pants thing 2 minutes before. But I let me just say real quick, I really enjoyed the conversation that we had on Crystal Kyle and Friends when you were on not that long ago.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I feel like I mostly ended up bickering with Crystal. So I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk more with you, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Definitely. I didn't even feel like you and her were bickering. You guys just had some disagreements and then fleshed it out. And I always find that whenever you're talking face to face with people, like everybody is sort of almost held to a higher standard in the conversation. So you're forced to be like more accurate with every point you make. And I think that sort of sharpened both your points and her points.
That is true. Yeah, it's kind of like the an armed society is a polite society. Imagine if all debates were held with you're across the table from each other and you both have a gun sitting right there. Like that would be an extremely polite and very nuanced conversation. People would really mull their points over, you know?
That's so true. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not gonna bother introducing you. Everyone here knows who you are. Thank you again for coming on. I had a bunch of questions, maybe half of which were serious, and
Sure.
I had no other plans, so I was just going to run through some stuff.
Yeah, shoot. You got all my time here.
Okay. So I have to get this out of the way right off the bat, okay?
Sure.
I need to know how do you feel about the old Kyle Kulinski tweets Twitter account?
That's a really good question. So I mean, I guess it depends what mood you catch me in. Like, you could say there's a little bit of like shame and embarrassment, just being a young idiot fucking around online. And then if you catch me in like an arrogant mood, I'll be like, yeah, there's a reason why I kept it up and the reason I kept it up is because I feel like as a public figure, everybody sort of deserves to have that insight into me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to whitewash anything about my past or who I am or how stupid I could be. And so I have like this weird principled thing where I know that like 99% of people would have deleted all those tweets and then got their public flogging and been like, I'm so sorry, I genuflect at the altar of public opinion. But I don't know, I just felt like I said it, and so I'm gonna keep the stuff up, and some of the things I disavow and think we're dumb, and then a lot of the stuff I just look back and think that's kind of funny.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is just my opinion, and it could be because I don't value professionalism much as like on its own, but I think it's an enormous sign of integrity personally, because normally people, you're right, are so hasty to just destroy any evidence of meaningful personality. It's like everything has to be wiped clean. But I think like this, because these tweets are fucking insane. I mean, a lot of them are just absolutely beyond the pale. But I mean, they're very relatable, I think. And because you and I do different types of content. You wear a suit. You're like a news show. You know what I mean? Like, you have like the affect, I think, of like a respectable commentator, and I have like an anime TV shirt. So, it's really different, at least aesthetically. And I know that I benefit from the the integration of that goofy shit and the work that I do, but I think most people wouldn't be brave enough to keep that up.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, Vosh, I'm not a hero. I'm not a role model.
This
I
is
don't try to
heroic.
I don't try to put myself on a pedestal. So if like first of all, everybody already saw my dirty laundry. So for me to go delete it after the fact is like, well, you guys already saw it, and whatever's on the internet is there forever. But like, I don't view myself as on a pedestal or better than other people. I view myself as a regular person. So like, I'm sure that anybody listening, when you were 13 years old, maybe you tweeted some dumb shit or said some dumb shit on Facebook or whatever the Zoomers are on now, and it's like, what are you gonna do? It happens, and some things you might dislike, some of the things you might look back on fondly, but it is what it is, and so that's why I left it up.
I do have one specific question before
Yeah,
I
sure.
get past the meme, because the Twitter account person reached out,
Mhm.
who actually manages that, and they wanted some clarification. They just
Yep.
wanted to know what you meant by this one, if you don't mind.
Sure.
It's older women with flip-flops on. Just because your feet make the sexy noise when you walk doesn't mean you're sexy. Hashtag true story. I share the curiosity. What did you mean by that?
Okay, so before I answer that, and I will answer that, let me just say this, just so everybody knows, like 93 to 95% of the stuff that's out there, as these are Kyle's tweets, are Kyle's tweets, but there are a few that have been made up. But for the one that you just brought up right there, that is 100% real. And so here's what I think I meant by that, because I'm doing a little bit of mind reading back to
It's a decade ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think that when I was in like high school and college, and it was weather was warm outside, all the girls wore like flip flops, and so I think I just sort of associate the sound of the flip flops with like being at a pool with women, and the women walking around with the flip flops making that noise, and being a young horny idiot. You just sort of associate like attractive women with the sound that the flip flops make. And so I started making that association. And then I guess one day I saw somebody wearing the flip flops, some older lady wearing the flip flops walking. I didn't find her particularly attractive. And so there's where the tweet comes from. I think like, oh, come on. You think you're hot because of the flip flop sound? You're not. Okay.
Right, and from the cauldron of inspiration comes genius. That account very rarely misses. Okay, I had to, or people would get mad at me if I didn't bring that up.
Sure.
So a couple other things, I guess, on a slightly more serious note. So politically, I mean, you and I have a lot in common. I mean, obviously, it's we could jerk each other off about how we want healthcare and stuff. I mean, you identify as like a social democrat, right? Not like the full seize the means of production, but more like regulated industry, government, that kind of stuff.
So yes and no, because, and this is something I've brought up on my show multiple times, because, I do have aspects of my philosophy that are post-capitalist. And so I think it's a fair label to call me either a social democrat. I've taken political compass tests where I'm described as a libertarian socialist. I've taken political compass tests where I'm described as, now I might mess up the terminology, but the video's up there if people want to go check it. But I think I took some left compass tests, and it described me as like a classical Marxist or something like that. So, and also I go as far as to say international moderate, because I view the policy positions that I support as actually very mainstream. If you ask people their opinions and you go issue by issues, that's another label I'm fine with. The other label that I'm fine with is populist left. So, I mean, all those labels broadly apply, and it's just hard to find one specific thing that fully encompasses all my views. Because, for example, so I know you like to talk about democracy in the workplace, worker-owned co-ops. That's something I definitely like to see a lot more of. But as you and I talked about on Crystal Kyle and Friends, I do think that there is a meaningful difference between like a small business versus a business with over 50 or 100 employees, where I understand that in principle, it might make a lot more sense to have more of a democratic workplace when the business gets over a certain size, whereas when it's a smaller business, I don't view the traditional capitalist hierarchy as necessarily exploitative or oppressive. It can be if you have a bad boss and you don't have proper regulations, but it is also possible for small businesses to not be as democratic as some worker-owned co-op, and that can still be okay in my worldview.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, I think it is sometimes difficult. I do like the moderate populist label, because I think it indicates something meaningful, at least, because when you do break it down issue by issue, most people are far more economically left than their voting would indicate, you know. Even
That's
with
exactly right.
Yeah, like if you ask most people, like, okay, unions, higher wage, this, that, or the other, like most people will belt out like pretty, not just progressive answers, but stuff that like Washington won't even meaningfully field, you know. But then you wrap it in with other stuff. I mean, it was like how Republicans pushing back on the Build Back Better bill. It was like, well, this is a woke bill, you know. They can't even talk about the econ side of things. It has to be, yeah.
They have to change the conversation to culture war stuff. That's their only move, because like you said, when you go issue for issue, and that's the thing, Vosh, is like the things that you advocate for and the things that I advocate for, particularly I think in the realm of economics, they really are phenomenally popular. So what I always say is I have zero marriage to any labels. I'll say whatever needs to be said in terms of labels, or not say anything in terms of labels, in order to try to spread the message far and wide and then get more people to agree with us, therefore getting us closer to change. So yeah, like when you go issue for issue, if everybody's with us, then okay, I'll call myself an international moderate if that's the thing that people want to hear in order to get us closer to those goals.
Okay, yeah, I get that. I think labels are useful when they're useful. As a category, I think they're
Agreed.
yeah, they're sometimes quite disruptive. So I think that brings me to, because, and this is one of the unfortunate things I think with my community in particular, because I'm so used to arguing with people, it's that I usually become aware of things when my community disagrees with them, you know? Like,
yeah, that happens, sure.
If my community was like, you know, every time you say something agreeable, then, you know, it'd be filtered through. But I do see when they get angry, and this relates because recently you tweeted something. I'm trying to find the exact tweet, but it was something to the effect of like, oh, here it is. In response to Shu saying that there's no Democratic politician she's excited for, which, okay, I get that. You said, I just want a New Deal Democrat, uncorrupted by big money, cool, who isn't stupid ultra woke and is a leader who gives zero fucks about media / elite backlash. Somehow this is more rare, etc. And a lot of people got really mad at the phrase "who isn't stupid ultra woke." I think I know what you meant, but would you mind elaborating just so that I know?
Sure. So I did a segment where I talked about this recently. Now, the specific thing which led to me using that term, and I had this on my mind ever since I saw it, is a November 23rd tweet from the Women's March, where they said, we just got an average donation of $14.92, and we apologize for bringing that up in our email to everybody because that invokes memories of oppression and genocide and all these negative things. So they're apologizing for the fact that their average donation was $14.92, and they mentioned that in an email. And so now, listen, we could look at that and we could say, well, whatever, it's a one-off. It's not like a broader issue. But you got to understand, as one of the co-founders of Justice Democrats, I saw this sort of stuff firsthand, where there was a mutiny because of Cenk Uyghur's old blog post that got brought up. And the staff basically said, it's him or us. So either Axe, one of the founding members and ideological leaders of what we were trying to do, or the entire staff is going to quit. And it was because he said things that were fucked up and politically incorrect literally a decade or more earlier. And another thing that was in my mind as I was tweeting that is, do you remember when Ilhan Omar got in trouble because she said it's all about the Benjamins, talking about the Israel lobby?
Yes, yes.
And what happened when she brought that up is everybody in mainstream media, all the Republican politicians and half the Democratic politicians all accused her of being anti-Semitic. Now, the point that she was making was no different than when people say, hey, Saudi money floods Washington, D.C., and they buy weapons deals and they buy politicians, or, you know, whatever, fill in the blank with any Gulf state. And nobody says that that's Islamophobic when you talk about the influence of the Saudi lobby. But when you talk about the influence of the Israel lobby, all of a sudden it's anti-Semitic. And I remember at the time very distinctly, because I felt very betrayed, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't come to a strong defense of Ilhan Omar. what she said, she came out there and said something along the lines of like, we need to center our Jewish brothers and sisters' voices and hear them out whenever they have legitimate concerns. And that's the stupid ultra woke stuff that I'm talking about, where if anybody brings up any argument about offense or ideology, a lot of people view it as axiomatically reasonable. When every now and then you need to have somebody on the left puff their chest out and say, you know what? You're wrong. You're being ridiculous. If you're upset about a 1492 email, which by the way, nobody actually fucking was, but if you are upset about that, you're wrong. If you're not coming to a strong defense of Ilhan Omar when she was accused of being an anti-Semite, you're wrong. And so that's what I mean by stupid ultra woke. And let me add, there's a reason why I put those two qualifiers. I didn't just say like, let's not have a woke Democrat. I said, let's not have a stupid ultra woke Democrat. And even with the two qualifiers, people like to read into what I say as if now that I say that I'm somehow not in favor of like equal rights for minority communities, when obviously I am.
No, right. No, I totally get that. I think that there's a lot of semantic confusion on that term, the woke, I mean, because
of course, yeah.
Right, because what people will often do on the right, is it's a blanket term for everything progressive, When they say like this is too woke, they'll kind of directly refer to like obviously bad stuff, like or I guess what they perceive to be, here's a 10-year-old drag queen, here's a time that a feminist did a thing that was bad because of feminism, but they're broadly attacking progressivism. And I think that when a lot of people on the left use the term kind of derisively, they mean like liberal identity politics. Because when I think of that, when I saw that tweet, at least I knew what you meant. I guess a lot of my community was upset with it. But what I think is like, like Nancy Pelosi and Kin kneeling during the BLM protests with the fucking like the scarves and
right.
shit, like this very performative, like incredibly insincere, appealing to people's progressive sentiment without doing anything meaningful. We just had the Virginia gubernatorial elections, right, where the Democrat really mishandled, I think, the critical race theory discourse. Now, the critical race theory shit is like some made-up Republican boogeyman, but you do need to be able, like, to move past. And there's a huge difference, I think, between dealing with it well, which is like, this is nonsense. I care about the poor. I care about the, or you can like, if you want like nuance, I guess, and I don't know if this is appropriate for a politician, but you can talk about the need to discuss some elements of things and sort of pick and choose with parts of the discourse you want, but just whole hogging it, like diving in fully seems like an overcompensatory effort to avoid looking like, you're the reactionary. There is a lot
totally
of mishandling there. You right. I think, yeah, that's what you mean, right? Like it's
that's exactly what I mean. And the thing is, like, since you know me and we talked on Crystal Kyle and Friends and we've interacted, there was like obviously a modicum of good faith in your reading of my tweet, but the people who would get upset by it are just totally unfamiliar with my show and totally unfamiliar with my opinions, and they have a filtered view of what they think I believe. And so when I say something that's like anti-woke, they just lump it in with like Josh Hawley saying something anti-woke, which is the craziest thing I've ever heard, because that guy's wrong about virtually everything and he's a fake populist, whereas I'm somebody who's like a real populist. So I think that that's an important part of the conversation where people like, whenever you make an argument, even if I disagree with it, I'm listening to it charitably because I know you're a smart guy and I know it's coming from a good place. But oftentimes, and this always happens on social media and online, people just are willing to immediately drop all good faith readings and go right to like a nuclear level. And I think that's silly.
No, yeah, I get that. I think it's always difficult because there's a really fine line between like which fights are we willing to take and which issues are we willing to give up on. There are a lot of people online who will say stuff like, we just need to focus less on the trans issue, less on like gay rights, less on like the race stuff. And I think that's misguided because it's important to present a unified front, but it's possible to do so in a way that sort of plays towards people's sensibilities as opposed to like overextending. You know what I mean?
So this is the line that I always use. I'm not going to give an inch on policy. I'm not giving an inch. So when it comes to trans rights, we're 100% in favor of trans rights. I push for trans rights legislation. I think it's a moral outrage that they're not a protected class. They should be. But does that mean that if I'm a Democratic politician and I'm running for president, that I'm going to spend most of my time or even some of my time putting that issue front and center? Well, no, because step number one is you have to win. In order to win, you lead with your good foot. And so you craft a message that is the most broadly appealing. Now, that doesn't mean that activists need to be bound to the same rules as like politicians, and activists should continue to push for change in the way that they see fit. But it's difficult because it's almost like we have to go back to basics and explain to people that strategic intelligence is actually important. You know what I mean? So, but even when I give the qualifier, like I'm not giving an inch on policy, when I make that point, people think I'm somehow downplaying those sorts of struggles, and I'm not at all.
To me, the ideal, at least in terms of political strategy right now, would be the Democratic candidate who is wholeheartedly progressive and unashamed of it. But when they talk about it, it's always like a, yeah, of course. Now let's focus on the real issues thing.
That's exactly right.
They never
You're
give it up.
100% right.
Even with big, like racial justice, like that's a huge issue, like tens of millions of people. But like you bring it up and it's like, yeah, I think there's a lot of systemic inequality, and I feel like the best way we can address that is with like this big pack, like economic,
Yes.
and you move forward on that, because you can get lost in the weeds otherwise. And Republicans, I feel, mostly vote on culture war stuff, so you put a huge target on your back by hyper fixating on relatively it's unfortunate that it's divisive, but you can support it without making it like the forefront of your campaign. You lead with the shield.
So let's get back to the McAuliffe point that you made, because you made a good point. How would I have handled that if I was McAuliffe and Youngkin's going all in on the CRT stuff? I would say, listen, unlike my opponent, I believe in free speech. I believe in academic openness. I believe in hearing all viewpoints. But let's put that aside for a second. I'm going to raise the minimum wage, and he's not. So if you want higher wages, you vote for me.
I think that would have done a lot better. Absolutely.
Instead of doing that, he went right down the CRT rabbit hole, and like they were able to quote mine him with little things he said, where it's like he's not even in favor of parents.
Too many white teachers. Yeah.
Right.
And the more you focus, the more they push back in it, right? Because they'll clip the points. They push back against that. You want them to target the economic arguments because they lose on those every single
time.
That's
100% right.
Yeah, let me get up on stage and explain why the people of my great state want lower wages. That's not what they want to do. Okay, wait, hold on. We're circle jerking too hard. We agree on this too much.
Yeah.
Okay, so the big, okay, well, I'll turn it up 8 notches, okay? So
let's do it.
With Jimmy Dore.
Mm-hmm.
Now you strike me as a person who is extraordinarily what I'm trying to think of the like the most like honorable term for this. Like, you believe so much in people, I think you're an extraordinarily, would it be good-natured? You don't like instigating drama. There's a collection of terms that are valid here, but I think I never get the impression from you as somebody who likes bickering, I guess, with people around you. So it's no secret that I'm not a huge fan of Jimmy Dore. It's putting it very mildly, but I guess I'm interested in your thoughts on this. It seems, at least from my perspective, and the perspective of a lot of people online, I think, that Jimmy Dore has gone very much down the toilet in recent maybe 2 years, but sort of accelerating with time, where it's gone beyond a kind of I mostly criticize Democrats and more towards a just fastidious, borderline conspiratorial obsession with attacking everybody else on the left over anything that he can, which is getting down to like practically Glenn Greenwald territory and like the direction that things have gone. Now, I'm not going to do anything cringe like asking you to denounce, but I am interested in your perspective, right? Like, do you just want to stay out of things? Do you think there's a glimmer of hope? What's your perspective on that?
So I have a lot to say about this, actually.
Yeah.
So first of all, I like to keep my circle tight, and I don't like to let a lot of people in. And what you're seeing now, what's going on with him, is a good reason why I wanted to keep my circle small, and why it was probably a mistake to get close to almost anybody in the industry. So he was a good friend of mine, but also Cenk and Anna were good friends of mine as well. And now all of them have a burning, passionate hatred of me. And that all really stemmed from the fact that I felt like I was dragged into their fight. Now, I never, ever held back in terms of discussing my feelings on the politics of what they would argue about. So all my views were well known about all the different things that they would bicker over, whether it was Russiagate or whatever. But when I was really like, I'm staying the hell out of this, is when it got really personal between them. And again, you got to understand from my perspective, since I know Jank, I know Anna. I was close with Jank, and I was close with Jimmy. So when I see it getting personal and ugly, man, I really feel like I'm stuck in the middle now. Um, any normal person in that situation, like there was this expectation that I had for other reasonable people that, well, obviously, I don't want to get in the middle of the personal shit, right? Like if you were fighting with some other creator and I knew you and the other creator really well, you wouldn't expect me to like hop in and white knight for you or some shit because that's wholly unreasonable, right? Well, I was sort of dragged into giving my commentary on the entire feud between them. I did it begrudgingly, but again, I felt like my hand was forced. And so I told everybody exactly how I felt. And one of the reasons why, apart from the personal side of it, one of the reasons why I didn't want to tell everybody exactly how I felt is because I knew there was no political home for my take. I knew everybody would fucking disagree with it because my take was actually relatively nuanced in the sense that on the politics of the fight, I agreed much more with Jimmy, but on like the personal side of the fight, Jimmy was being a fucking dick. And so I had to say both of those things. And when you say both of those things, you're going to piss off the Dorites and you're going to piss off TYT. And you're also going to piss off Jimmy himself. And you're also going to piss off Jank and Anna. And so I basically lost every friendship that I had in this industry because I told people exactly how I felt about their fight. Now, on the politics of Jimmy, I will say I'm familiar with what's been going on with his channel because I see bits and pieces that pop up on Twitter, but I haven't watched a single Jimmy Dore video or a single TYT video since the fight. I've totally excised them from my life. I literally haven't, spoken a word to any of them since then because, by the way, behind the scenes, you can imagine both Jimmy and Jank, like, personally blew up at me behind the scenes. And so, I mean, I'm a grown-ass man. If you're going to act like that and that's it. It's over. Like we're done. So obviously I left the TYT network and all that stuff. But in terms of Jimmy's politics, so what I've seen is there was a time when he would mostly criticize Democrats, and you got the sense it was from the left and it was to improve them. Then, over time, it slowly creeped up from like, okay, 70% of your commentary is going after the Democrats, 30% is going after the Republicans. Now it's like 80-20. Now it's like 90-10. And then it got to like 100% of the commentary is just like Democrats are bad. Now, if you have a platform, you have to realize, even if you think it's like, well, duh, the Republicans are bad, there might be some 14-year-old coming to your channel who doesn't think that's a duh, and all they see is you shitting on Democrats. And then you're sort of painting a misleading picture of the world. And then when it really got to a point where it was like, this is just sad now, is when the vaccine skepticism stuff started happening. That's when I saw the things on Twitter where it was like, here's his most recent however many videos, and like 60% of them or some shit were just like doubting the vaccine. And when I saw that, I was like, well, it's a good thing that all my ties are severed with everybody because I do not want to be associated with that in any way, shape, or form.
Okay, yeah, okay, I follow that. I get that. I want to talk about the politics in a bit, but there was this weird thing where it felt like, now obviously this is inference on my part. We don't know what Jimmy Dore actually thinks or feels, but I followed your videos, or I saw them when they came out with regards to that that dispute between Dore, Anna, and elsewise. And it felt like the fallout that came afterwards from either side was very different in the reasons it came about. Because with Anna and Jank, it felt like they were under the impression that you were holding water for Dore because you were friends, right. Or because right.
And then ask Jimmy how he feels about me.
Well, but the thing is, like with Jimmy, it felt like, because I can sympathize with Anna and Jank's perspective, because I don't distinguish between political and personal when it comes to like Dore, with the harassment stuff with Anna. To me, it's categorically identical to any kind of advocacy for a policy position, because there is a kind of what would you call it, like a political normativity to what we accept in our spaces or not. So with regards to that, I guess I understand that. Dore felt like he was going in on you just for not fully committing, like it felt like he was calling you like a traitor and a backstabber. And I watched your video, and it honestly seemed like a his engine, the steam engine, is drama and outrage, and just, we're all fuel to that, and just eventually we have to be thrown in. you know?
Well, I think his big contention was that he felt like I didn't acknowledge that he, according to him, was, quote, blackmailed. That when Anna sent that message to Jimmy and was basically like, hey, listen,
Oh,
if you
that was
don't.
insane. That wasn't blackmail. What a horrible that no, yeah, that he was just wrong on that. That was not
But
blackmail.
I will say this, though, and this is not in defense of Jimmy. This is just my attempt to objectively read the situation. Don't you find it questionable that the time Anna chooses to send that message is after when Jimmy's been beating up on TYT relentlessly on his channel? Now, by the way, a lot of those criticisms that Jimmy had of TYT, I think, are totally unfair, and I think they cross a line and they're dumb. And I mean, one of the things he did is like, "Oh, you're accusing me of misogyny? You're the real misogynist. Look at this video from like 2008 or whatever." And I was like, okay, rolling my eyes, like, come on.
Right.
So without getting into whether or not like the specific criticisms there, don't you think the timing of that was like, yeah, Anna was trying to say, I have this thing I could hold over your head, and if you don't stop beating up on us, then I'm going to tell everybody this.
I think I don't know if I can say it's necessarily coincidence, only that I feel like that's in line with how a lot of Me Too stuff happens, right? Like usually if there's some kind of improprietary behavior, something bad like that, it gets held for some time until there's like a following instigating incident. It felt like, I mean, in a way, especially since didn't he show like DMs of her beforehand or something? I feel like with respect to that, it wasn't so much blackmail as it was like you've gotten away with this shit for so long, like that kind of deal. You know?
See, and I think that's a great analysis, and I think that's where like the fundamental breakdown in people's interpretation of this comes from, is that whoever's more like Team TYT, that's definitely going to be their reading of the situation because they trust Anna over trusting Jimmy. And whoever's Team Jimmy is going to think like, no, they're blackmailing him, and look at the timing of it, and because they believe Jimmy more than they believe TYT. So, and I do feel like some would say this might bias my perspective. I think there might even be an argument for the opposite. But I feel like since I was friends with both of them, it almost gave me a unique insight in that I viewed both Jimmy and Jenk and Anna as like good, kind people who I had nothing but positive experiences with. And so when it all unfolded, you know, I that's why I didn't want to talk about it, because I'm like, well, I kind of have like a nuanced view of what's going down here. And I know if I speak up, I'm just going to lose all my friendships. And unfortunately, I was dragged into a place where I felt like I had to speak up.
No, I get that. I don't think it can be blackmail categorically because I don't think there was a threat in there.
No,
She just
it's
said
definitely
she was
not
gonna.
legal. It's definitely not legal, like, you know, prosecutable in court blackmail. It's just, you know, the argument from the Dorites would be, well, after Jimmy's been beaten up on you for weeks on your channel, on his channel, now all of a sudden you bring up this thing, which obviously you were okay with for years beforehand. But listen, I'm not saying that to defend Jimmy. I'm just telling you what the Dorite view of it was. From my perspective now, I'm just, you know, it from a personal perspective, it sucks because I really do value Jank, Anna, and I value Jimmy as a friend. But from a political perspective, I'm just happy that I have like no strings attached to any of them anymore, because from a political standpoint, I didn't agree. I mean, I obviously massively disagree with the editorial direction that Jimmy's show was going in, but I also had serious, you know, issues with how TYT had been over the past 3, 4, 5 years, where they didn't really align with what I viewed as my values much anymore.
Right. It's just I get that with the TIT politics. It's just it felt like, I mean, when you're talking about like default charitability, it seemed like this. I mean, this got followed up with by like Jimmy Dore kind of bragging about the harassment. Apparently, he lied about it because Anna said there were like other comments, and he was, you know, like trying to embarrass her with.
That was my issue, Vosh. My issue is exactly what you just said. That's why in my segments where I talked about this, the biggest problem to me wasn't even the initial incident. The biggest problem was how he talked about it in the video, because he talked about it so like flippantly and glibly while acknowledging that this is something that she was like, she really felt disgusted by and disrespected by and didn't like. And then now he's sort of like talking about it as and laughing about it. And it's like, well, nice new skirt. And it just struck me as like, this is not how an adult handles this situation, and it's gross, and I want nothing to do with it. And so at that point, for him to want me to come in and like white knight for him is like, fuck off. I don't agree with how you're acting here. I don't agree with how you're talking about this shit.
Yeah, it seems like, I don't know, kind of the almost like optimized to be the worst behavior possible. If you engage poorly in the past, I've got a big home for retribution in my heart. Or sorry, not, oh my God, not retribution, rehabilitation. Wait, my bad. No, okay.
Both can be good.
Right, that wasn't a slip up. Rehabilitation, and I think, you know, there's a lot of room for people to change. With Dor though, it was like, you know, okay, so he's going after TYT for political reasons, you know, okay. Anna feels like, you know, maybe DMs were leaked already. She's like, okay, well, fuck you. I'll just make it clear you did this to me. And he does this thing, like kind of laughing about it, playing it down, apparently being dishonest about it. It's for like monetizable content, and then accuses her of blackmailing. And it seems to me like categorically the way an abuser would get away with things for years, where you do stuff and then afterwards your immediate response is never reflection. It's always like minimize, invalidate, make jokes at the expense of this person, use my community to harass them, downplay, you know what I mean, like stigmatize, everything that you can do. And again, this is all inference here, you know. I'm not saying he's some kind of criminal mastermind. It's just I definitely sympathize more with the hurt from Anna, and I don't know much about Cenk really, but I guess from Anna, because from Jimmy Dore's side, it really just seemed like he was mad you weren't like his pawn or like his legionnaire. You know what I mean? Like you didn't go 100% in favor of Jimmy Dore, and then at the end of your video say you were donating to him as an apology for being on Earth when this happened to him. So he was going to spend the next week, you know, calling you a liar and a traitor and a snake. And and I felt bad looking at it, you know. A lot of people thought you were grifting, that you did that to appeal to Jimmy because Jimmy's also a huge channel. But to me, it's always come off, I guess, like half you don't want to get involved in that way, and half I don't think you have like a natural predisposition for attacking people that are in your circle.
That's 100% correct. And let me just say this, for anybody who thinks that what I did was like calculated or there was an angle or something, I lost my friends because I told people exactly what I thought about the situation. And that's why I tried to stay out of it, because I knew if I tell people exactly what I think about this situation, they're all going to fucking hate me. And so I felt dragged in. So I had to do what I thought was the, you know, morally correct thing. I felt like ethically, like now I have to say something. And I told people exactly what I thought, knowing not only would I lose my friends over it in the industry, and they were friends for real. I mean, I co-founded fucking Justice Democrats with Cenk Uygur. I've done live shows with Jimmy Dore. You know, these are people I've talked to. I know them personally. And, you know, Anna and I've had a bunch of lovely conversations. I've been on TYT 4 or 5 times, whatever, in LA. So not only did I lose my friends, I actually went into it knowing this is something my own audience is going to get pissed at me for, because some of the people in my audience are TYT stands and some of them are Jimmy Dore stands. So for me to go out there and say the things I said, knowing that everybody's going to fucking despise me over this. It is literally the polar opposite of people claiming like, oh, he's got an angle, or he's grifting, or he's trying to, you know, appease Jimmy, or he's trying to appease TYT. And by the way, you saw both those reactions online. You saw people like, oh, he's a fucking neoliberal shill TYT cuck. And you saw people like, oh, he's a little Jimmy sycophant. And it's like, if people aren't going to listen to my whole points and actually digest them, then what am I supposed? What can I do? You know, like I'm just putting out there everything I think in detail. And if people want to misconstrue it and misinterpret it, it's like, okay, well then what the fuck am I going to do? And this is one of many reasons, Vosh, why I've obviously come to the conclusion that I don't even read any like sort of pushback anymore, commentary anymore, because I used to think I have a thick skin. Apparently I don't. Apparently I'm very sensitive, because you know, it's one thing, like legitimate criticism that's substantive, like you and I have when we talk about issues. That's fun. I love that. It's great. But like things that I think are just totally like misstating what I believe back to me and accusing me of shit that I'm not guilty of is like, okay, I can't handle this. I just have to check out from it.
Okay. No, I totally get that. I mean, I think the issue's been hashed. I think, well, the ultimate winner here had to be Jimmy Dore, right? Because his community is fucking feral. He got a lot of content out of that.
Well, and let me just say this as a final word on this real quick. You know, I haven't watched a single TYT video since this happened. I haven't watched a single Jimmy Dore video since this happened. But I have, stuff has popped up on Twitter that I've seen that, you know, has caught my eye. And one of the things that is just inescapable is the shit that Sean caught Jimmy doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say this. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe you're right about how I'm like too kind in how I read people. But when I saw that, I was like, I cannot believe that Jimmy did this shit. No matter what interpretation you want to give of the situation, either, the idea that he himself, was the one who spliced up the article to change the literal meaning to the opposite of what it was, whether he did that or you believe the kinder interpretation that his producer did that and he just didn't read through the article and he goes out there and whichever interpretation you believe, either fucking way, totally inexcusable. Completely inexcusable.
Right, the producer, yeah, well, yeah, it's, no, I completely agree. It's actually something I've seen before from Tim Pool sometimes, where they'll they'll be trying to make a point, so they'll be like reading the article, and then you can see like right below the paragraph they're reading, there's a paragraph that completely tears apart their argument, like they're making an argument on crime going up, and then it's like just the one paragraph below, and they begin that paragraph and then abruptly turn away. Sargon did the same thing. It's just this, when they do it live, they don't even bother to edit around it. It's just, it's so evident, anyway, I don't mean to, ramble on about that. Lord knows I do that enough on my stream.
Let me just say real quick, on the vaccine stuff, it's particularly egregious to me because the actual evidence is overwhelming. There was a French study of over 20 million people, and the vaccines reduced severe illness, hospitalization, and death by 90%. That's a study with over 20 million people. Even if you grant the anti-vaxxers their most insane claims about, like, that VAERS thing where you can report adverse side effects from the vaccine, even if you grant them every single adverse side effect, you know what? You still should get the vaccine because the damages and the harms of COVID are way worse. And so, like, there's just not even remotely a good argument for anti-vax shit. And so my tolerance for that is so thin. And so when I saw that thing, the Sean thing, I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, man. You want to talk about you lost the plot. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Okay, this segues almost perfectly, okay? Because there is something, you to me, you're like a bridge to me. You're a bridge between me and a group of people I hate. You're not in that group. You're the bridge. You're closer. It's this group of people, I'm using a very, very broad term here, who portend to promote leftist ideas through exclusive criticism of the Dems, So Glenn Greenwald did this for a time, and now he's basically kind of just a Republican, I guess. Michael Tracy went this route. Tulsi Gabbard has transitioned fully, and now identifies as a Republican. What a world we live in. The gray zone types, I think. I'm using some very broad terms here, I think, but your content's held water for me because you don't fuck around with it. You'll talk about the Republicans, you'll condemn them. Everything is appropriately contextualized with you. But there's this strategy where, because criticizing the Dems is essential from a progressive perspective, you need to, where if you exclusively do that, you can produce like a left-leaning affect while moving people to the right by never showing them, well, okay, we criticize the Dems mostly, but there is something worse. There are the Republicans. Do you, and this goes into so many things, I mean, like Assad and the Syria stuff and a lot of foreign policy business, do you feel it's important to always make sure that your audience is being led down the right political path, or only to report on what you feel is meaningful or interesting? Like, do you think that like content through omission is something worth considering?
So I think those two things go hand in hand. I think they're married. I think they're tied together at the hip, basically. And what I would say is, from my perspective, and obviously I'm going to argue this because I'm me, but I don't like to view myself. I could see how I could be interpreted as a bridge this way or that way, but I like to think, no, I'm not the bridge. I'm the spot where I think people should go to hear the stuff, because, like you said, I take great pride in the fact that I think I contextualize things well, where I'm going to go after the Democrats when they do something fucked up. But you know what? I'm also going to give them credit when they do something good. Like when Biden signed that executive order to raise the federal minimum wage for federal contractors and federal employees to $15 an hour when he pulled out of Afghanistan or whatever. There's a list of things you could talk about. Right to repair is another thing. So I'm going to be fair on that front, but I also have things in context enough where, yes, maybe in the past I wouldn't have viewed it this way. Like I would think if I'm beating up on the Democrats from the left, even 100% of the time, if it's from the left, what's the problem? Well, the problem is the way others can interpret that. And you don't want to mislead people inadvertently. You don't want to make them think, hey, maybe the way to go is right because you bash the Democrats 100% of the time. Even if that's not your intent, it could lead people that way, and you need to be cognizant of that. So that's why, I think if you, it's almost impossible to do statistical breakdown of my entire channel, but you could probably do it over, a short time frame. I don't know what the breakdown would be, but maybe I'm probably 60-40, 60% going after the right, 40% going after Democrats, or 50-50. And I think that I try my best to be as accurate as humanly possible when I talk, because I know that there are people who will try to misconstrue my words or misunderstand what I'm saying. And so I try to cover all my bases as I do it. So I think I have a responsibility to cover the news and talk about the things I find interesting in as accurate and responsible and reasonable a way as possible. And obviously, I try my best to do that. And if every now and then I fuck up, I try to make sure that I correct the record if I do.
Okay. I'm really happy to hear that. I've noticed that there is an epidemic of people right now who will adopt positions that they only hold through implication, So a really common thing back in like 2014, 2015 was people who would attack SJWs, like red-haired feminazis, whatever. But the people who did those attacks often called themselves egalitarian, progressive, left-leaning, so on. But their channel was dedicated exclusively to attacking the straw men of the left, the worst elements, which there always will be. And in doing so, either they or their audiences invariably turn to the right, because what else is going to happen if your content is entirely anti-left? And I see the same with like China defenders, for example. People who defend China very rarely talk about China. They talk about the United States. They'll criticize the hell out of the US. And don't get me wrong, fuck the USA. I am all here for that. But it's always got to be done in an appropriate context, because if all you do is, the West does this bad, the West does that bad. Well, I agree, okay? And then you see a couple positive things about China, and it's like, wait, you're not going to talk about China's union breaking or China's violation of civil rights or China's authoritarian. Right. So it's always through implication. And it frustrates me because it feels like so often, I'll give you one example and then I'll stop rambling, okay? I was recently talking, I think you and I disagree on this, but it was about the OPCW gas Syrian attack thing, whatever. Now, I'm of the opinion that it's possible that the investigation was rushed or mishandled, but I don't believe the conspiracy bent in Duma, the idea that the West planted these to justify the targeted airstrikes afterwards. And I was having a conversation with a guy, and he would criticize the report, which is his right to do, but he would not outline the alternative narrative. So he would never say, okay, well, Western agents were sent in, okay, white helmets arrived here to deploy this, or they chipped out the building and sprayed like gas on the, on this wall to make it appear suspicious. They never said that. They would only criticize. And it worries me that we're simultaneously entering an era of unprecedented political radicalism and also not willing to acknowledge it. Like, you don't do this, I don't think. Your channel's pretty holistic. How do you respond to that? You can't even criticize them directly.
Listen, I have a really, really, really rigid intolerance to groupthink. I think it's really fucking stupid. I think it's so easy to just hop on a bandwagon and say, I'm going to believe all the things that the people with me over here believe. And so, I try my absolute best to evaluate each issue on its own merits. And you're right, there is a portion of the left that any nation that defines themselves as socialist or nominally lefty, they're just sort of given a pass because American imperialism is bad. And therefore, if you're posturing against American imperialism, it's like, well, then you must be one of the good guys. And one of the things I despise across the board is the very overly simplistic good guy, bad guy narrative, whatever it might be. And so you have to handle each issue on its own merits in order to consider yourself a rational, logical thinking human being. And unfortunately, you're right. There's a lot of just like hopping on whatever bandwagon with whatever ideology. And I never like that. And I really value my own independence and my own talking about the issues that, I think are interesting. And to your point on Syria, so I will say this on Syria.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get into the whole gas attack and stuff like that, because I don't know.
We need to bust out the papers on both ends. Yeah.
I don't know like all the ins and outs and details and the specifics, and I haven't read the report and all that stuff. But on the broader issue of Syria, so yes, my coverage of Syria has been, I take a very hands-off, non-interventionist perspective when it comes to Syria. Now, the main reason why I do that is because when everything unfolded in Syria and you had the Syrian civil war, there were tiny factions and elements of the civil war where you could say they were quote unquote moderate rebels, where these are seemingly normal people who have reasonable grievances against an authoritarian government. But as time went by, and this happened under the Obama administration and then continuing onward, the nature of the rebels, it became very clear that we're dealing with jihadist elements here. That we're dealing with Al-Nusra Front is what they used to call themselves. They since changed their name because they ran into the PR problem that they're fucking jihadists. And the U.S. actually had at a time, it was a covert program. I don't think it's so covert anymore, but we were arming jihadists on the ground to overthrow the Assadist government. Now, look, I'm fine. Granted, it's of course true that Assad is an authoritarian dictator, of course. But what do you do in a situation like that? My perspective, I'm not just a flat revolutionary. I don't think, well, overthrow the authoritarian and then whatever comes after is definitionally better. Because if you overthrow Assad, then you have the jihadists fill the vacuum. And it's like, well, this is what the U.S. is facilitating over there. In the same way we facilitated this in Iraq with Saddam Hussein, in the same way we facilitated this in Libya with Gaddafi, actually the much better thing to do, and I think the morally correct position, and I think the correct position from international law is, it's none of our business and we should stay out of it. And there's so much American hubris in the idea that we even have the right to determine what should and shouldn't happen in this country, even though they have an authoritarian government. I mean, Trump was open about the fact that we're occupying the areas of Syria that have oil and we're taking their oil. And so that's why my perspective is a very non-interventionist, hands-off perspective, because following it through the years on my show was very clear to me that the nature of the opposition became very fundamentalist, it was jihadist elements, and whatever replaced Assad was absolutely, based on recent history, looking at Iraq and Libya, was going to be worse than Assad.
Yeah, no, I certainly sympathize with the non-interventionist perspective for the most point. I don't mind interventionism as a concept, the idea of like a, international body intervening to prevent a human rights atrocity, like Rwandan genocide tier stuff. I think that's acceptable, highly defensible even. Obviously, it's a coin flip and whether this is going to go well. I mean, we don't have the best history with that kind of stuff, but I guess it's always the implication stuff, because so often, I believe that Assad does the gas bombings, whatever, sure, of course. It's certainly within his profile. He's a lunatic and a dictator. And why wouldn't killing people? Is that much for somebody like him? Don't
you find the timing curious too, though, Vosh? Because that always was curious to me, because there was a time a while ago, there was a meeting between whatever the Secretary of State or whatever term they use for the Russian counterpart. He was there with Assad. They were given a press conference and they said something along the lines, is there anything, or John Kerry was with him when he was Secretary of State, is there anything that we can do so that the West doesn't intervene here? And they were like, yeah, give up all your chemical weapons. And the next day Assad was like, right on. And then literally the UN went in there and took out all the chemical weapons. This was before any of the accusations of the chemical attacks. And then when the actual chemical attack, the alleged chemical attack did happen, Assad had already won the war. So why would he do the one thing that would bring in the West again is what I don't understand.
Oh, it wasn't just one, right? There were 38 or so chemical weapon attacks, with many of which were verified by multiple international agencies.
Do you think any of them were done by rebels, though? That's another question that's pretty important.
I think one or two of them were attributed in the reports to rebel groups. I mean, it's not like we're talking about a high bar for involvement, because some of these are pretty easy to construct, right? Some of the chemical weapons they're using. But I think beyond that, the profile pretty clearly matched, what was going on with regards to Assad and his supposed intentions. It's true that by that point he had essentially won the war and taken the city, but it felt like a way to quickly clear the place. And clearly, it hasn't really led to much in the way of intervention. We had those 3 targeted missile strikes afterwards, but there were no casualties from them. It was just 3 strikes on plants we
Well, hold
alleged to
on,
be.
Vosh. There was a New York Times piece that came out like last month or within the last 3 weeks or so that actually said we killed like 80 innocent civilians in Syria. It just
with
came out recently.
with those 3 that followed the
I don't know if that was the exact strike that they're talking about, but I know they were talking about a U.S. strike in Syria. They killed like 80 innocent people.
I'm sure we've killed plenty of innocents in Syria. Absolutely. I'm just talking about those 3 because
Okay.
years of our involvement. I have no doubt. I'm not endorsing U.S. involvement in the area, though. I did like us protecting Rojava. I'm very much in favor of that, supporting the Kurds.
Well, Chomsky did too, so at least you have some good backup on that.
Yeah, though the people who like Assad tend not to like Chomsky, so it wouldn't help me much in those arguments. Anyway, it's always, you said before, it's a black or white thing, and I feel like it so often is, right? Because my position is an anti-interventionist one. I just think that Assad, chemical weapons his people. But when I say that in some groups, like the gray zone types, they'll be like,
Your
okay,
CIA.
you got your CIA, your State Department, you want permanent war, you want state intervention, and I never say any of these things. I mean, I am CIA,
Yeah.
but they don't know that, and it's not relevant. And also, they literally work for the Russian government. Okay, RT is literally a
See,
state.
now I don't obviously I don't think you're CIA, but I also don't think they are getting paid by like hostile foreign actors. I
Well,
mean,
Blumenthal's with RT, right? And
well, I was going to say
Mate
I don't
presents
I
with
don't
the
know
UN.
if he works with them, but what I would say is like Tom Hartman worked for RT, Ed Schultz worked for RT, like getting paid through like Russia's CNN. While there are issues with it, I don't think it's equivalent to like taking money directly from Putin to spread his nefarious narrative. If
Oh
you know
no,
what I mean.
well, CNN is a private agency though. RT is like Russian state government funded and controlled. Look, it's a little tongue in cheek. All I'm saying is, okay, if there was like US state media and I worked for it and then I presented findings on Syria on behalf of the United States, the United Nations, they would call me a State Department asset. So it's a an asymmetrically levied criticism is all I'm
So
saying.
I want to ask you this though, because I think this is an important question.
Mhm.
Let's assume for a second that you're right about the gas attack.
Mhm.
What should be done if those facts were correct?
Well, at this stage in things, I don't know if any kind of intervention would. I don't know if we would help more than we would hurt. Like even in the best case scenario, I don't think it's about uh, the following political action that we would take because the U.S. decided that it was a gas attack, and we did have those 3 airstrikes. So that's already been decided years ago. In terms of what we have now, though, I think it's about an accurate historical record, or at least by implication, how we consider the behavior of some of these leaders. Maybe right now we can't like do anything good through state action, but in the future I think it's really important to understand the forces and the incidents that went into how that region developed. It might make us make better choices in the future.
So I agree that it's important for intellectual honesty and historical reasons to get to the bottom of stuff like that and why it happened and whatnot. I will say, as a general rule, though, I like to abide by the Chomsky rule on this, and I'm sure you've heard Chomsky opine about this previously. But his rule is that, generally speaking, somebody who's in the West or somebody who's an American should be first and foremost interested in the crimes of our own government, namely because we actually nominally are in a position to do something about it. So he likes to say that, for us to criticize some foreign authoritarian government and denounce what they're doing, okay, you can do that, but that's about as useful as like going back to 1700 and condemning some government that existed back then. And I do think there's a logic to that makes sense to me because especially when you look at the nature of the U.S. government and what we're doing right now. So we have 900 military bases around the world. We spend more on our military than the next 12 or so biggest nations combined, and most of them are our ally. We're currently sanctioning the shit out of Cuba and Venezuela. We still have an iron chokehold on South America. We literally militarily support 73% of the world's dictatorships. We're actively aiding and abetting both a famine and a genocide in Yemen. And we're doing that with Saudi Arabia. Biden postured as if he wasn't doing that, like, oh, we're not going to give them any offensive weapons, but we will give them defensive weapons. And then lo and behold, nothing really changed. And we're still aiding the Saudis with their bombing campaign on Yemeni babies. And we're helping them bomb open air markets and mosques and schools
Specifically
and
on the
everything.
babies too.
Yeah. So, since we are responsible for, as the world's sole superpower, for so many of the destructive things that go on around the world, I do think that the bulk of our time is better used critiquing the government that we nominally have some more control over than the evil foreign boogeyman bad guys, because I don't want to inadvertently help feed the hysteria that might lead to some sort of intervention in the same way. Because, you know, one of my political awakenings was the lead up to the war in Iraq. And when that was going on, I mean, it was, looking back at it now, I mean, it was like mania in the country. Like they built this absurd propaganda case against Iraq, and you had Colin Powell go to the EU or the UN and hold up the vial and say Saddam's got yellow cake, and they said we don't want the evidence of Saddam Hussein's WMDs to come in the form of a mushroom cloud, meaning like let's act first and think later. And so there was all this propaganda and these lies that just led us into an illegal and offensive war that ended up killing minimum hundreds of thousands of people. And so given those facts, it leads me to be like, I understand the mindset of the type of people here, the gray zone types and Blumenthal and Mate. They're trying to more or less abide by that Chomsky principle. Now, having said that, that doesn't give you permission then to like overlook wrongdoings from the Chinese government or any other government. And you shouldn't be an apologist for those governments. We still need to be accurate about the facts of the situation and what those governments are doing. I would just say the bulk of our time should be spent more on the U.S. end of it.
That I agree with. I think there's a categorical difference between the types of criticisms people levy at foreign governments that are being done in like a holistic political program and the ones that people will do to fearmonger or to stoke state propaganda, that kind of thing, you know. Like, for instance, Republicans like to fearmonger about China. I also am afraid of China, but it's for very different reasons, and it's really only because China might get better than us at doing what we've been doing. So that criticism necessarily acknowledges that, you know, the antagonism must be directed inward. There are people who overfixate on foreign stuff as a way of ignoring domestic issues, even on the left, which is more than a little frustrating. It's always nuance being bled down to binaries, where, you know, you're either a U.S. State Department talking head and you want to you know, invade Syria, China, you want to, like, the whole thing, you know, or the other end of things. I do worry sometimes about anti-American sentiment. Like I said, being anti-American is great, you know, keep up the good work. if you're up to it, you know, as long as it's the right kind, not like, you know, kill all Americans, whatever, but like anti-America as an institution, the statehood, you know. As you said, we've done a lot of bad stuff, but sometimes I feel like so much of the criticism that people levy at America is just from other countries playing their own team sports, you know? Like, a lot of the anti-America stuff that you get here today has ties to RT. This isn't conspiratorial stuff. Like, Russia has its own state interests, of course. We do the same damn thing. But there are people who will do this kind of, you know, like, heavy criticism of America in a way which seems like it's just part of geopolitical destabilization, which I find a bit frustrating because it looks sometimes like a left-leaning talking point, but it doesn't really serve the left. It's more of a nihilistic, what would you say, like a lack of faith in democracy as a concept, not just in ours, like a disillusionment, I think, that some people try to cultivate, which is hard to cut through because once you're really disillusioned, you know, what's the point of political action? Voting won't do anything, which is probably true. But even direct action is, I mean, what? And you're on a dying ship.
Well, so the foreign policy stuff aside, the doomerism thing and the nihilism thing is something that has really been frustrating me recently. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you caught, I did a segment on this on my show not too long ago. I don't know if you were able to catch it, but I started the segment by giving people, you know, cause for some hope that, you know, I'm not blowing smoke up people's asses. I was telling the truth. So one of the things was, I forget the exact number, but it's like 23 of 33 elections, 23 or 33 races in the last election, the same night of the McAuliffe race, the DSA won with their candidate. So that's something that's cause for hope. The John Deere strike, which actually went in the direction of workers, that's cause for hope. So I gave a bunch of things that are cause for hope. And then, you know, I made an argument against doomerism because first of all, we don't have the luxury of being able to throw our hands up and be like, meh, what are we going to do? And also, there is this thing that happens where you can get so cynical and so nihilistic and become such a doomer that all you do is stand on the sidelines and lob bombs at people on the left who are actually trying to make a change. And because you could say they're naive or they're sellouts or they're whatever. And it's like, well, at least they're trying to help the situation. And this is this sentiment on the left, which is very self-defeating. I think the complete and utter lack of solidarity in today's day and age, where everybody on the left is at everybody's throat, and the sense of like doom and nihilism because we weren't able to get Bernie elected, it makes people feel like there's absolutely zero hope. And I don't agree with that. I don't think we have the luxury of believing that, but also I just fundamentally disagree with it because just fucking work harder, fight harder, get out there. I don't care what you do. If you want to join a union, if you want to join the DSA, if you want to do direct issue advocacy on something specific, if you want to go ahead and try to create some third party, which I'm convinced is going to go nowhere, but if you want to try it, at least you're trying something. Go ahead, go work on that. So that doomerism stuff is really getting under my skin. And the thing is, people were accusing me of like, you're saying the same thing you've been saying for years, and like now you're just doing this because this is how you keep your viewers. And it's like, if I went full nihilist, I would get more viewers. Mm-hmm. If I went full doomer, I would get more viewers because that's the prevailing sentiment on the left, that people feel that. And I'm refusing to do that as a matter of principle because I don't think it's correct. I don't think it's true. And I also never see this shit on the right. When the right hits a setback, they're like, great, I'm just going to fight twice as hard. When the left hits a setback, they throw their arms up and they say, let's tap out. And I don't agree with that. I mean, one of the things that I brought up in my segment is that I think people understate just how powerful the president of the United States is. And so if you could just find a way to get one decent, uncorrupted lefty in there, you could do so much good just through executive orders alone. You can give everybody healthcare through executive order. You can give everybody free college and eliminate student loan debt through executive order. There's so much you could do. Legalize marijuana. And there's this feeling on the left of like, we're aimless and we're leaderless and we're listless. And it's like, people just throw their arms up. And I really hate it now. Like I get where it comes from and I'm sympathetic to a certain extent, but at the same time, it's like, up and at 'em, bitch. Like, are you done nursing your ego yet? Go ahead, cry in the corner for 15 minutes and get your ass up. Let's get to work.
Yeah, the thing that really pissed me off was after Bernie lost the primary, and don't get me wrong, it was sad for me too. But the same day I was saying, like, okay, well, life moves on. All right, okay, Biden's better than Trump. Let's go.
You were better than me at that moment. I was distraught.
Okay, no. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you picked yourself up more. There were other, like, I don't care about Bridges, whatever, like the Chapo Trap House people or whatever. And they're like lefty. I mean, they're like borderline anti-electoral. I feel like there were so many people who just fell apart after that. And like, don't get me wrong, I get upset about it too, but it worries me sometimes. You made the point, this isn't the same with Republicans, and I agree, that lefties need this like coordination, like a movement or a person to get behind, something to, like a lightning rod to direct the energy. But the right is just perpetually zealous. It's true they have Trump right now. I mean, they've got QAnon. I feel like they have more institutional support than the left by far. But they are so fastidious. I mean, they kept the flame of the Confederacy alive in the South for 100 years after it was...
You still see the flags!
Yeah! They didn't... After failed Reconstruction, they kept it going. But, like, the left is so sullen sometimes. It frustrates me. I feel like we're in a really good spot in history right now in terms of potential left advocacy. And obviously, we're still shackled to the Dems, at least for now. It's like a dying beast that we're feasting off of as we try to grow stronger. But we have the potential to develop something meaningful and self-sustaining. And I don't know what mechanism you'd need to build to let that happen. Because I know, like, you drive engagement. Of course, I drive engagement. We have channels. I mean, but we have to keep pushing in, we have to keep putting money into that machine to make that work, figuratively speaking. With the broader left, I mean, what do we need? Like unions to come back? How do you get people to work on their own?
Yeah, so yes to what the last thing you just said, absolutely, with unions. And I do think there's actual data to back this up. And there's a great publication, Labor Notes, that details like all of the union activity going on in America every single week. They like detail all of it. And so there is this revival of unions now where they've been playing defense for decades. And now it's the first time in a long time they're like, actually, we're going to go on the offense. So that's one thing that's super important. I do think that, and you see this a lot on the right, like the right, funded mostly by Koch brothers money, but they'll get involved in like state and local politics and try to take over state and local politics and school boards and shit like that. I mean, that's an important move that the left needs to get on. Like the left needs to get serious about having some degree of power, even if it's at the state and local level, because there's a lot of stuff you can influence at the state and local level. So unions, number one, state and local politics, number two. I'm a big fan of direct issue advocacy. So to try to lobby on specific issues, protesting obviously is super important. And I mean, it's just, again, we don't have the luxury of like sitting back and just letting stuff happen. Like we need to be more active now than ever. And it's a shame because I have to spend like half my time even bothering to tell people it makes sense to get out of the bed in the morning. And it's like, I get it. I feel it. I've been there. I know what it's like. I sympathize with it, but let's go here. Let's go. And by the way, so you mentioned after Bernie lost, we should probably talk about this because people would probably enjoy a conversation that we had about this. But so you were not at all Bernie or bust. In fact, you were very like anti the Bernie or busters.
Yeah.
And I was never full Bernie or bust, but I openly described myself as half Bernie or bust. And, you know, I can explain what I mean by that if you'd like, or I could let you take the floor first and tell everybody, you know, why you think your position was superior and all that.
No, hit it up. Go for it. And then I'll.
Okay, so first of all, let me say a lot of people sort of misunderstood my position because, again, I get it. It's not like people are ever going to listen to every single word I say, so they can't get the full complex and nuances of the argument. But in 2016, for example, when it was Hillary and Bernie, after Bernie had already lost, I actually engaged in a debate where I took the position that Hillary is the lesser evil because I didn't think that was like it. If you're on the left, that wasn't a matter of opinion. It's actually an empirical question. You could literally go policy for policy and determine, okay, where are there more left policies? And even if you factor in the corruption of both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and even if you factor in that Hillary doesn't mean half the shit that she says and all that, even after doing the whole calculation, it was still an ironclad fact that Hillary was the lesser evil. If there was a test that was going on, Donald Trump would get like an 8% out of 100 and Hillary Clinton would get like a 37%. And it's like, look, 37 is higher than 8. It's a fact. Now, if you want to rebut that by saying, well, it's both an F, fair enough. It is both an F, but one is higher than the other, and you shouldn't bury that fact. And a lot of people do bury that fact. So anyway, I debated people where I said Hillary is the lesser evil. But having said that, I live in New York. I'm in a safe state. I'm not going to vote for her. I don't feel compelled at all to vote for her. And then when it came to Biden, I felt a very similar way where the test I ended up developing that I put out there for the world is this. I don't think I'm an unreasonable dude. I needed to be convinced that at least on like one or two of the things that I care deeply about, that he would deliver on it. And when it came to Biden, I just wasn't convinced of it. So I didn't say, I'm not going to vote for him and nobody else should vote for him. I said, I live in New York. It's a safe state. I'm not going to vote for him. And you do whatever you want if you're in the other states. So that was my position. Now, looking back on it, how do I feel? I feel like he did end up pulling out of Afghanistan. So he actually did pass my test. My test being do one or two things that I agree with and that you're committed to. So it would have actually made sense for me to vote for him given that fact because he passed my purity test. But to the broader question of whether or not we can keep like voting for a lesser evil, it's something that I struggle with because I get the logic of saying just do the least amount of damage possible. But then I also understand the mindset of like moral red lines and this idea that like if you vote for this candidate, you own what they do. So if you vote for Hillary Clinton, you're owning the Iraq war. If you vote for Joe Biden, you're owning the fact that he did that drone strike which killed babies. You know, and so I don't know how to square that circle. I don't know what the clean answer is because if you take politics seriously, then you are going to own whatever the person who you vote for does. And it's like, that's true, but it's also true that you can limit the amount of damage if you vote for that person who's going to do a lot of harm. You know what I mean? So I don't have a good answer to that. And that's why TJ Kirk and I had a good conversation on this recently because we're of a similar mind on this. But anyway, I give the floor to you.
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, you understand my position well with regards to that. I just think that if that's the case, if you vote for no one, you also have to own what the winner does. I don't know if there's a way of abstaining from that sense of moral responsibility because we all have the ability to vote, you know, stating you're not a felon or whatever other exception might keep a person from voting. I think it's an important enough issue that it's acceptable for there to be a sort of social obligation to participate. towards whatever the least harmful option is, and that the decision not to do so is kind of like a de facto move to support. There's that old quote. What is it? Like, all it you need for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. If you're in a situation where you have the potential to stop a mugging, a la Spider-Man style, or you see a drink get spiked at a party or anything like that. I think we're comfortable with the idea that in some situations inaction is morally wrong, even if you don't necessarily know if either road you could take, if you do take action, is like a good one. I guess I just don't really believe in moral red lines, because everything is comparative. At the very least, a red line morally has to be compared to the cost of inaction. And though it's true any individual vote is infinitesimally insignificant with regards to a presidential election, though it's amplified for you and I, of course, because the arguments we make, the things we say, it reverberates across a broader audience. But even as an individual, I think in terms of strategy, there's some value there as well, because we don't have very high voter turnout in this country, and I think low voter turnout ultimately helps the establishment. Disillusionment is really, really effective for them as a weapon, because the less people care meaningfully, even with Trump on Biden, like the money's on the line, and we still get what, 65% voter turnout? Like, pathetically low. It would be a laughingstock in any other country of comparable democratic development. I think that disillusionment is really beneficial to the establishment in the same way that the disillusionment on the left is beneficial to the right. It prevents us from meaningfully considering these issues. Any independent who looks at Biden v. Trump and doesn't have a strong opinion on that in favor of Biden is, in my opinion, at least, I mean, on the basic stuff, like unions, whatever, even if Biden lies about 80% of it, it's still a step up. I think you should have strong opinions on that. And no matter where your red line is, for a lot of people, they don't think there's a difference at all. They just think it's like,
well, that's
politics
just
as usual.
That's factually wrong. Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I describe myself as like half Bernie or bust, because I always took issue with the Bernie or busters who would make the argument that either they're both the same, or some would even say Trump's the lesser evil.
Because they'd say Trump was like anti-war. It's like, no, fucking no, he was. He tripled drone strikes. Yeah, no. I completely agree. But a lot of independents feel that way. There's this sullen, like these people working 3 minimum wage jobs, like they barely have time to cook themselves a meal. They like get half their shit from like 7-Eleven, like grocery marts. And I sympathize with these people a lot, and I just think that there needs to be a really strong push against political apathy. And one of the forms that takes is like a strong opinion on who to vote for.
Well, I definitely agree that we need to defeat political apathy. And I agree that political apathy helps the establishment. But I think a more persuasive time where that argument lands a lot more is when we're talking about a primary and it's Bernie Sanders, and you actually have a choice for a decent human being who cares about the right things. By the time we get to Biden, I mean, it's a tough one. So one of the things you said there, I want to respond to, because it was an interesting way to think about it.
Can I just say one quick thing, though?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I think the difference between Trump and Biden is quite a bit larger than the difference between Biden and Bernie Sanders, in large part because it's much easier to destroy than create. Trump can do a lot more damage with 4 years than the comparative good a progressive president with an establishment Dem Congress and Senate, House and Senate could, relative to Biden.
I'd have to think about that more. I don't know if I agree with that. It's certainly plausible that that's the case. And again, having looked at how Biden's been in office, I think, what I predicted was he would get some stuff done in the first 2 weeks. I'd enjoy the executive orders that he signed. I did enjoy that. He did that second COVID rescue package where he said $2,000 checks. He didn't get us that. He did get us $1,400 checks. I'll take it. It's better than nothing. Although there is still criticism to be had there. But then my rest of my prediction, I think, was relatively true, too. I didn't think he'd get much else done, and he really hasn't. I mean, they abandoned $15 minimum wage because they couldn't get it through. They abandoned public option and haven't heard another word about that.
Don't even talking about, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff. But again, I give credit where it's due. I'm happy he pulled out of Afghanistan. I'm happy he stood up to the media. And while he was pulling out of Afghanistan, I'm happy that he signed that executive order to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour for 400,000 federal contractors and federal employees. I'm happy he signed right to repair. So there are decent things there. And I think it's objectively correct to say that he's better than Donald Trump. But so you made a point earlier, which I wanted to come back to about the whole lesser evil debate. I actually didn't feel like by not voting that if Trump won, I would be owning what Trump did. And but you made the argument that like, well, if you don't vote, you actually are just co-signing whoever the winner ends up being. Can you flesh that out a little more for me?
Yeah, I think that in a situation where there's some kind of democratic decision making being made and you sit out, you're kind of implicitly endorsing whatever option comes about. Like even if it's something like your friends are voting on which restaurant to go to, usually when people opt not to vote at all, it's an indication of indifference. But I think that they're kind of responsible if, somebody wants to go to the poop shack, right? I mean, they could have voted against the poop shack if they wanted to, but clearly they didn't have that strong of an opinion on it. Now, I don't think you have to own any of it, by the way, because I'm a utilitarian in this respect. To me, it's purely like if it was two candidates and one of them was Hitler and the other one was Hitler, but he's pro-trans rights. That's right there. That to me is the answer. One of them is objectively better than the other from my ethical perspective. I'd feel terrible about the situation, don't get me wrong, but to me, I don't hold that water. I just think, okay, well, at least we get the trans rights while we're all dying.
See,
that's me of that.
That's interesting to me, and this is I'm now having a flashback to when we did our Crystal Kyle and Friends podcast, because I remember in the post conversation follow up that Crystal and I did. I had a light bulb moment where I said, I figured it out, because you mentioned something during that podcast that just reoccurred to me now. You basically said something along the lines of, and correct me if I'm wrong or if you want to rephrase it, but you were like principles, forget principles. I care more about the consequences. I care more about, like you said, you're utilitarian. So, and I think I don't think like that. I think I do think almost in the like purely principled way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. Chomsky has a bit on this, I think, where he talks about the expression or voting as an expression of personal virtue being something that he disagrees with, because his perspective is on mine. Like voting for a socialist should be you get it out of the way, and then the next 4 years are dedicated to meaningful direct action. The voting stuff should be just go for it and then get it out of the way. But I guess for me the issue would be how do I. If we have fundamentally different ethical systems, you have to use different arguments, I guess. But the way I think of it, at least, is that if you're looking at these candidates from a matter of pure sort of ethical, like purely as a matter of principle, I couldn't vote for Bernie Sanders either. The line that you draw here can be really arbitrary, but I mean, I don't really believe in statehood.
No, I will freely admit it's arbitrary because it's all down to my subjective value set. Like I freely admit that, like I have policies that I think are correct for the country and would be good for Americans. And you could go down a list of them: Medicare for all, free college, abolish student loan debt, $15 minimum wage, you name it, all the different things. And so, yes, I am judging people in accordance with my value system. Now, some people are much more hard line and they say, you have to be for all these or I can't vote for you. And if people think that, then you're right. They wouldn't even vote for Bernie Sanders. But I guess, do you really feel like there's no test or standards in order for you to vote for somebody? Because to me, I do find that a little bizarre, like the whole Hitler or Hitler plus trans rights thing. Like I look at that and I'm like, at some point you got to be like, the whole fucking system is terrible and I can't perpetuate it any further.
No, the whole system is terrible. I mean, it's practically like some kind of saw trap. You know what I mean? Like, let this person die or put your arm in.
That's exactly what it is.
Right. But I guess, I mean, circumstances will eventually force an answer from you. So, I mean, if there's only two possible choices, I would rather have a hand in the least bad one. I guess for me, if I was to set it along the lines of principle, I'm principally anti-fascist, I think. With regards to Trump, okay. I think there's a meaningful enough threat there of eroding our democratic institutions. America can survive another George W. Bush, I think. Not good, mind you, but survive. Make it out the other end limping. A lot of older Republicans as well. Whatever damage they do, it'd be horrific, but I feel like the thin thread we're hanging on right now is the understanding that our democratic processes are more or less intact, and because if that snaps, it's like it's over. Whatever happens next is very quick and very bloody.
I actually think George W. Bush was worse than Trump.
In terms of total harm done, undeniably, 100%. Yeah.
And he's the one who laid the precedent of Constitution, Schmonstitution, forget your Eighth Amendment protection from cruel and unusual punishment. We're going to torture people. We're going to have no due process. We're going to lock people up in Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib, no habeas corpus. We're going to do illegal and offensive wars. So I actually think from both a constitutional perspective and a harm done to the country perspective, he was worse. And more importantly, he laid the groundwork for every president after him, including Obama, to basically say, it's a matter of opinion. If you want to torture, you torture. We're not going to, because I'm personally against it. And so then the Constitution and these rights became like optional to everybody. And then you allow somebody who's genuinely unhinged as a human being, like Trump, to get in there and have the reins of power. And for example, like you pointed out before, he increased drone strikes, colossally, and he got rid of whatever red tape was left there. And it's like, this is where we're at now. We have a system now where there's nothing reining in the executive branch. And unfortunately, given American imperialism and how psychopathic these leaders are, a lot of harm is done as a result of that.
No, that's true. Yeah, it laid the groundwork, undeniably. We should be thankful Bush wasn't a populist, but I guess that wasn't endemic of the era. I think so.
Correct,
So
yeah.
right, bad example then. Maybe just, I should say, I feel like there's kind of like a multiplicative or like an exponential effect on how much damage you could potentially do depending on how effective your democratic structures are. You can take a look at other like military coups in countries around the world or places where there has been like a bid for power, and usually the corrupting influence of the more like fascist party or whatever is slow until very suddenly it's not, because there's usually just one key person that has to break. Some member of state whose job it is to oversee an element of the process, one law that needs to be undone, one organization that needs to have a majority of people in charge that are sympathetic to that party. And after that, that's over. At that point, it's just a matter of time until the dice fall. So I'm very afraid of that. So principally, I guess I would draw my line pretty definitively there, because whatever Biden is, I don't think he's necessarily corrosive to the democratic process.
See, I think that there are definitely meaningful differences between Trump and Biden, and that's why I laid out the policies where I think Biden actually does deserve some credit. And this is stuff where, when I point this out, when I was giving Biden credit on withdrawing from Afghanistan, I was getting shit from lefties who claimed like they cared massively about getting out of Afghanistan. And I'm basically was like, shut the fuck up. What do you think it was going to be? Roses and fucking puppies and holding hands and singing Kumbaya when we got out? It was going to be messy, but it's the right thing to do to get out of there. But I don't view the difference as so much that Biden isn't also actively partaking in the type of downfall that you just described.
I think Biden's involvement is more one of abstaining, which is actually the criticism that I would lay for Bernie busters, I guess. I think that Biden's problem is he's not doing enough about gerrymandering. He's not doing enough to rally the American people in favor of left-leaning populist economic causes that can unite us against the corrosive forces of fascism. He's not doing enough to push back against Republicans' constant attacks on the democratic norms. I think, and you could do this without like violating free speech or anything. I think it's just a matter of Biden isn't an orator the way that Trump is. Whenever Trump cares about something, if there's a policy he wants done, or even just a person he's mad at, he'll campaign around the country and shit talk that person for weeks. Biden doesn't do this. He stays more or less quiet and emerges once every month to give a passionate 4-minute speech on the necessity of believing in hope. And this is what Democrats offer us, really. The knowledge that every once in a while the animatronic gets wheeled out from the Oval Office to assure us that everything's going fine. But that to me is a crime of, what would you call it? Abstaining. That they could be doing more. They're like a stopgap. They prevent the left, the real left, you, me, whatever, from responding more appropriately. And the Republicans are just far more dedicated than they are. They're much more active. They're more vicious with how they use their political capital, Yes.
See, I would say Biden is worse than just abstaining, because if you look at his record, so the crime bill, for example, in the 1990s, this is when Democrats were very tough on crime. It was the era. There was high crime, and they viewed it as like it actually is the more left position to have so much sympathy for the victims that you're really harsh on the perpetrators. But along with that came locking up nonviolent drug offenders at a ridiculous clip. And of course, there's massive racial implications to that, because it was black and brown people who bore the brunt of it. And this was Joe Biden who was largely responsible for it. I mean, he wrote some of the crime bill. You have the Iraq war he supported, which, as we already described, ripped the Constitution to shreds. It was an illegal and offensive war. You have he supported the Patriot Act, which led to the illegal NSA spying and metadata collection. So forget our protection from unreasonable search and seizure. That's out the window. And then even things like today, he made it seem like he would get right back in the Iran deal when he became president. And then he didn't. He didn't get back in it. And that makes us less safe. It also tells the world the United States of America doesn't have to abide by any agreements or treaties that we do. So that actually makes it so it's more likely that a country like China takes our position as the sole superpower, because we don't even uphold our word after we negotiate a deal. So why should anybody negotiate any deals with us? We just go back on it immediately. So I don't look at Biden as like Trump is actively pushing us in the wrong direction. Agreed. And then Biden comes in and he like stops anything from it. He doesn't go back in the right direction, but he just sort of blunts it where it is. No, I actually think he also moves it in the wrong direction, just at a much slower pace than somebody like Trump.
Well, what you talked about, the only thing you mentioned there, which is relevant to the immediate presidential term, would be his, with regards to the Iran nuclear deal, which to me is also, a crime of abstinence, really. I think, now I'm not defending Biden as a career politician or anything. I'm only saying that in his term now, I don't think he's making moves against the foundations of our democracy. He's failing to repair them, but I don't think that he's attacking them. I think that our institutions are relatively safe with a person like him in charge, because he's not a populist. He's a doddering old man. It's not a defense. He's just not anti-liberal the way that somebody Trump might be. And by liberal there, I mean in the the Enlightenment sense, like liberalism, the ideas, the values of democracy, the virtue of civic participation.
So in other words, you mean if he loses, he's not going to be like, I'm staying, like Trump?
Well, yeah, no, I don't.
Right,
right,
that's
yeah,
what you mean.
Even
Gotcha.
Hillary whined for months after, but she conceded
Right,
after.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Of course.
Anyway, I mean, we agree on who's worse or who's better. At the end of the day, where a person draws their principle line is going to vary, I think. It's just, I guess, as broadly a product of political strategy, I feel like it's a disservice to more radical groups to suggest that you have to hold water for everything your candidate does. Because I feel like that's a perspective that only works in sort of like sheltered Western elections. For example, there are other countries where there might be an electoral choice between a competent capitalist and an autocrat, like a full-on actual, like they will literally just destroy the country if they're put in power. And there are like lefty groups in that country, and I don't want to like sneer at them like, what, so you're pro-capitalism if they vote for someone who's not great, but is at least stable over that. Or I don't want to sneer at anarchists or anarcho-communists around the world who are put in these positions where the lesser evil makes a real difference to them as opposed to the alternative. So to me, it always has to be about that comparative moral advantage, because whether you make a choice, reality will make one. And I would just rather tip the scales very slightly in favor of the one that's least shit.
I think that there's a compelling argument for the point you just made, and it's one that I struggle with from time to time, where I do feel like there's an internal logic there that makes sense to me. And that's why I never begrudge anybody who does sort of suck it up and make that lesser evil vote. And it's funny because there are lefties who say, I'm against voter shaming, but then if somebody does a lesser evil vote, they're like, you fucking voted for Biden?
True.
So, yeah, there's a
True.
total contradiction there, and it's ridiculous that people don't catch on to that as they're doing it. But so I don't begrudge anybody who does that. What I will say is, and I'll let me give you a little bit of insight into my own voting history, so maybe you could see where the sentiment came from within me, where I feel like I sort of own whatever the politician does. So in the 2008, the first time I was able to vote was the 2008 Democratic primary in New York. You have to be registered as a Democrat in New York to vote in the Democratic primary, so I registered as a Democrat. John Edwards was out by the time it got to me. John Edwards was running as the furthest left candidate. Of course, he was actually a piece of shit, and there was a scandal with him. His wife had cancer, and he was cheating on her, whatever. So a bunch of shit. Anyway, he was out by the time it came to me, and it was Obama versus Hillary. Now, believe it or not, people are going to be surprised to hear this. I actually struggled with who to vote for between Obama and Hillary at the time, and here's why. Hillary in 2008 in the primary was openly running on single-payer healthcare. Barack Obama was not running on single-payer healthcare, but Barack Obama was openly against the Iraq War, and Hillary was not. So I had to weigh, like, okay, I care about both these issues like equally, like they're equally important to me, but what do I do? The reason why I ended up voting for Obama in the primary is because Hillary had attacked Obama like a few days before the New York primary, where she said something along the lines of, for Obama to say he's going to negotiate with Iran without preconditions, that's naive, and you shouldn't do that. And I was like, fuck out of here. Of course you should negotiate with them without preconditions. So I ended up voting for Obama in the primary, voting for Obama in the 2008 general. By the time the 2012 election came around, I was faced with a conundrum, because a little bit before the 2012 election against Mitt Romney, there was an article that came out. I forget who did it. It was one of the big publications, maybe Washington Post or New York Times or something like that. and we learned about the extent of the drone war and like the thousands of innocent civilians who had been killed because of the drone war that Obama had greenlit. And he actually massively ramped it up from the Bush years. And I don't know if that's just because the technology wasn't there yet from the Bush years and it was there under the Obama years, whatever. But so it was very clearly the takeaway from that story to me was like, this guy I voted for greenlit this drone war, and now he has blood on his hands, and I sort of feel responsible for what he did. And then so in 2012, I thought about it inside and out, and I came to the decision I can't do it. I'm going to vote for Jill Stein. And so I voted for Jill Stein, Green Party candidate. Now, again, I live in New York. I know there's no chance Jill Stein's going to win. I'm not an idiot. But it felt like my main takeaway was this stuff matters. And if this stuff matters, I need to take responsibility for my own actions and my own participation in the system. So I need to vote for the person who most aligns with my values, and Jill Stein most aligned with my values. Now, again, I'm not telling other people to adopt this voting idea, because it is, I'm not going to lie, it is kind of a luxury if you live in a safe state to be able to think about it in this sort of esoteric, abstract way. Because again, if I'm in a swing state, I do think the calculation changes. And I do think I lean a lot more in favor of what you're describing here, because it is, if it comes down to the practical matter of like, no, it really fucking matters now, then it's like, I guess I just got to do the least amount of harm possible. So anyway, that's my little story as to why I think this way about the vote, but I don't want to put on anybody else that way that I think about it, because I'm not convinced it's correct. It's just one way of thinking about these things that struck home to me when I thought it through originally.
No, I get that. I feel like there's more room for that kind of optimistic voting, especially in like primaries and safe states. I mean, that's the place where you have the most room, I think, for experimentation. There is a benefit in the general, I mean, not in the primary, to voting for a candidate who's a surefire win, because having a high turnout for that candidate still makes things better in terms of the democratic mandate in favor of that candidate, or at least their party. You know, like with Trump Biden, you know what I mean? Biden won, but I would have much rather Biden won by 40 million votes. I mean, that would have been, first of all, it would have been very funny. The social media,
it should have happened. I predicted like 350 something or 360 something electoral votes. Biden let me down.
yeah, honestly, the fact that we can't even get that with Trump as the alternative is terrifying. And I think right. What that speaks to fundamentally is that disillusionment, because, and this is very much a product of my bias. Okay, I think that everyone who didn't vote, or most everyone who didn't vote back in the 2020 election, is Biden leaning. Because I think that the Republicans are much better at coalescing their base. Anyone who would vote for a Republican does vote for a Republican. Whereas there are plenty of people who are sort of passively, and I think the stats back this up. If you take a look at advocacy for better healthcare, for unions, for gay positivity, trans positivity, racial justice, these are like 60 to 70% of the population. And yet 30 to 40% votes Democrat. The remaining 30%, the groups that don't typically support those causes, votes Republican, and that leaves the middle ground of people who would be on the left, in some ways at least, if not all, were it not for, well, Biden wasn't a very exciting candidate, so that's what I feel like I proselytize over. I focus on the electoral stuff more than I want to, you know. I don't find it, like, especially interesting, except for how consequential it is. But I do think that there's something deeply wrong with the ability for anything even vaguely left-leaning in this country's ability to attract the interest, attention, and support of the majority. We clearly fail in that respect, in spite of us having better messaging. So,
no, see, that's where we definitely disagree on that, because I actually think the American people are already there, and the thing that stops any, actual wins from occurring is the fact that Washington totally represents corporate interests and billionaires, and they're totally bought and owned. And so when we go issue for issue and look at the polls, people are with us on like every economic issue, every foreign policy issue, and we just don't get what we want. We never do. That's why Congress has a 12% approval rating, because people know on some level they're always voting for a lesser evil, and they're always voting for somebody who is not going to represent them, and they're just there to represent like Pfizer and JP Morgan Chase and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and stuff like that.
Okay, wait, I have a question.
Yep.
How would you feel, or what would your response be if the Democratic Party was Bernie aligned. You know, let's say the Justice Dems have engaged their coup. You know, we've guillotined Pelosi or whatever in a Minecraft in Roblox. You know, we've taken control. Okay. And let's say, in spite of that, and in spite of all the positive messaging that arises from it, there's basically still the same voter split. How, if that turned out to be the case, what would you diagnose the problem as? What would you say is like the step forward from there?
Honestly, gerrymandering, because I don't know if you've been following this stuff to this point, but the Democrats need to win the popular vote by like 5% in order to just hang on to the numbers they currently have. And right now in the generic ballot, Republicans are up anywhere from 5 to 10% in one poll. So it's looking like a bloodbath, even if, let's say, Biden suddenly snapped out of it and was like, shit, I got to legalize marijuana. Here's an executive order for that. I got to cut another stimulus check. Here's that. Even if he did all that stuff, you might get the polls might get back to D+2 or something, but you still need more than that just to hang on to the numbers you have. So there is a giant systemic institutional advantage right now for the right because of the gerrymandering. I mean, they just rig it. I mean, I don't know if you look at every midterm election going back in modern history, the Democrats always win the popular vote, and oftentimes they lose in terms of the number of seats.
Okay, I'm so happy you're saying this because it really pisses me off. Because, like, they blatantly cheat. Like, clearly, obviously.
No doubt about it.
Like, with and on everything. What they were doing with taking away the, like, voting stations in Texas before the 2020 election, like, in those neighborhoods. And
the war on mail-in voting is fucking cheating. That's just cheat. That's all that is. We are going to cheat. We don't want mail-in votes, even though mail-in votes are totally legitimate.
They're so blatant about it. The whole 2020 big lie election scandal stuff, all of it. And then, you know, honest to God, I don't have an issue with playing dirty. Fuck them. Yeah, gerrymander the shit. Just bleed them dry, okay? And have gerrymandered districts that look like fucking tapeworms laid out on a table, okay? I don't care. just skewer the country. Because it's between gerrymandering and the Electoral College, where it feels like the Republicans have a permanent, like, 10-point bias in their favor.
They do.
Yeah, after you've taken the popular vote into account. Which is fucking insane. But when you talk about removing this stuff, they accuse you of cheating. Like, you're like, that's my handicap.
They're the kings of that, Vosh. Like, they are the kings of, like, as they're cheating, they're like, you're fucking cheating. You're fucking cheating. It's always been their move.
I completely agree. This is what I've said, right? Or this is an element of electoral anti-fascism. In Germany, Nazis can't run. You can't do that. You can't. For good reason. I think that's fine. I think we should have done that with the Confederacy after Reconstruction. Absolutely.
I heard you say we should have put a bullet in the back of the head of what was it, the slave owners? Or was it the
yes, undeniable. They went to war. They were the economic. Yeah, absolutely. We should have. Everyone responsible for the secession. Clear as day.
You're gonna make me lib out on you, bro. I'm gonna lib out on you.
At the very least, the military and political leaders. The Reconstruction didn't go nearly far enough.
Reconstruction was a joke. Reconstruction, I'll give you that. Reconstruction was a total joke. That's obvious.
Something like 30% of white families owned a slave. So if you got like every single person who owned a slave, you would get quite a few people. At the very least, the leadership. But anyway, the systemic invalidation of some political perspectives, at least in form, if not directly, is something that I think we need to consider, especially because they will always do it to us, you know?
See, now on this we disagree because...
But that's what we're talking about with the gerrymandering. We're saying, like, well, fuck them. They will always cheat.
So what I would say, I don't actually agree with, like, okay, well, let's just gerrymander and cheat in return, because I think if you just make the system fair, you have some independent boards that draw it up or whatever, then we'll win every time either way. So we don't need to cheat. We just need to get it back to an even playing field for us to win.
If from their perspective, that would be the same, though, right? Like, to them, fair gerrymandering. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That's from their perspective. Of course, they're gonna fucking say that shit no matter what.
Okay, I actually have a question for you because you are much more a free speech extremist than I am. I think I'm very much so. But to me, the most free speech positions are ones which are willing to defend the sanctity of that institution, even if it means limiting some speech, you know? Like, much in the same way that some people will go to war to preserve peace, I think it's sort of a necessary self-correction. Obviously, you can go in bad roads with that, but so can you with a lot of social institutions. Law, jailing, you know, we choose the lines and where those fall. With regards to politicians, okay? So I've
Yes.
said this. I feel like we are not nearly judicious enough in sedition charges against people in Congress, you know, like higher up political officials. Because, like, for example, January 6th, we have Republican officials who were in contact with people with on burner phones, planning essentially to attack the Capitol in an effort to delay or stop the ratification of the votes. You know, now this fits the definition of sedition to a T. You know, to conspire against the United States in order to eliminate or delay the passage of a law. But for some reason, I feel like we're terrified of that. If it had been me up there in January 6th planning that, I would have been arrested. Why do political officials get to do this shit and get away with it, whereas the stooges they use to attack the states by proxy, they go to jail?
So what I will say is this, and Crystal and I got into a really good debate on this recently as it pertains to the QAnon shaman. You know, the QAnon shaman.
What was he got 3 years or 18 months? What was it?
He got 3.5 years in prison, and that's on top of 9 months he just spent locked up, basically in solitary confinement. And her and I had a debate and a discussion about what we think is a fair treatment, well, a fair punishment. And so my line all along has been this in regards to January 6th. The way I would approach that is with good old-fashioned, old-school police work, where you don't need a new Patriot Act 2.0 where you take away more people's civil liberties more in order to go after these people. And that's what the security state wants to do, is they want to give themselves more entrenched power and more money, and they want to use this to spy on everybody even more and take away more civil liberties. But what you should do is everybody who actually committed a crime on that day, throw the fucking book at them. And so I'm 100% on the side of that. Now, in terms of the lawmakers and how they were involved, all I will say is the bar needs to be very high for wrongdoing and criminal action, because even Trump, and you might disagree with me on this, but even the way Trump approached it, he spoke out of both sides of his mouth that day. On the one hand, he's like, you're very special people. You're very beautiful people. I know why you're doing this.
We love you.
Let's march to the Capitol. We love you. But then when the shit hit the fan, he did come out and say, but now I want everybody to go home. And just the fact that he said that covered his bases enough where there's nothing you could really throw at him legally in terms of some crime. So in theory, if there's somebody who's directly involved and they commit an actionable offense, then of course, throw the book at them. But I'm not sure any of them did something that's really something you could prosecute them over. I also think we need to be careful, because the precedent could degrade us, and, you know, because anything that we might do to them, they'll, on much looser standards, try to throw at us. And so it's a door we need to be careful opening, in the same way with speech laws. Like, I get it. No defamation, no slander, no libel, never direct threats of violence. All that stuff is illegal, even to the most absolutist free speech bro like myself. But those things matter. And if those laws are broken, okay, take action. But outside of that, I try to lean as heavily as possible on the side of freedom and live and let live, because the alternative is just much worse.
Yeah, no, well, I agree we don't need an invocation of any new laws. I just think the ones in the books aren't really being enforced, you know? If I had done what
So give me an example for a congressperson then, because you mentioned Congress people that were involved.
So like Gassar, right? The people who, like, communicated with some of the organizers for the Jan 6 rally. Like, what they were doing there was absolutely, like, as Boebert, Holly, like, criminal conspiracy, you know? This was an effort to halt or abrupt the passage of a law. I mean, that absolutely fits the definition of sedition. No getting around it. I just think it's one of those situations where they can get away with it, but the others can't. You know, the QAnon.
So what did he say exactly? What did Gosar say when he was setting? What was he like, talking to Alex Jones and shit? Like, what was he saying?
Oh, I'd have to go back through it. It was like a month and a half since I read the thing. I'm working a bit off sort of a degraded memory here, but
okay, all right, no worries.
Right, it's more about, like, or with regards to Trump. You know, at the very least, I think that inciting a riot would be a charge brought against Trump if Trump wasn't Trump. If there was another person who was there, some non-presidential figure who, yeah, you know, democracy's being stolen from you, now go to the Capitol. I think charges would be brought against them. It's just another way, I think, in which the political elite get shelter from the stochastically damaging behavior they engage in, which will always benefit Republicans because Democrats never do this shit. Democrats just aren't rowdy enough, at least not yet. My worry is that unless we're vigilant here, we might get a worsening of stochastic conditions. Republicans have been essentially insinuating that Democrats need to die for the country to survive for a while. Sarah Palin had those target markers on like Democrat politicians around the country. The language they use is very incendiary. And I just think like one of these days, somebody's going to take a shot at a Democrat. Some congressman is going to be getting a sandwich and his brains are going to get splattered over a cafe window. And it's going to come like 3 days after some Republican politician is talking about how, we need to, the Democrats are enemies of America. They are enemies. We would be fighting them if they were from another country. And then we'll find out the shooter liked that politician and listened to them. And eventually this process gets bad enough, where there's a chilling effect and we're essentially under siege by a legally impervious Republican class who know their constituents are crazy enough to do the dirty work for them. That's my fear.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something there. I would just say everybody obviously has to tread carefully in terms of how you would go about attempting to prosecute somebody for something along those lines, because you never want to make it so that there are like leaps of logic in it. Because even with like Bill O'Reilly, for example, he very famously went on Fox News over and over, and he would refer to this abortion doctor George Tiller as Tiller the baby killer, Tiller the baby killer, Tiller the baby killer. And he did it for like years. And then one day somebody murdered George Tiller. And you could say, does he bear some sort of ethical and moral responsibility for that? Probably. I hope he fucking has trouble sleeping at night. Is that something that's an actionable offense? Probably not. In the same way that when Representative Steve Scalise was killed by somebody who supported Bernie Sanders, none of us, rightfully none of us, were like, hey, Bernie, maybe you bear some responsibility for this. It's like, well, no, you can't have that leap of logic, because people are individuals and they have agency. And even though in the macro sense, what you're describing is a very real phenomenon that people need to be aware of and be careful of, and watch your language and don't feed into the hatred, at the micro level. And when it comes to prosecutable offenses, it's just a very hard thing to connect the dots in a way that doesn't at the same time set a terrible precedent or just totally come up with a whole new approach to the law, which is too loose.
I completely agree. It's really tough to find a good line here, because on one hand, I do think that elected officials should be held to a generally higher standard, but on the other hand, an unequal application of that standard is a classic way for authoritarians to remove people from inconvenient positions of power.
Bingo.
Also, a lot of these laws pertaining to stochastic violence weren't really, they came about before the modern media, which I think it's a whole new beast now, right? Nowadays, if you're a really big YouTuber, you can direct millions of people against individuals. You can do everything but dox them, and your followers will dox them for you. You don't have to dox them. They'll do it. You can, if you're malicious enough, you can essentially enjoy legal impunity while ruining people's lives in ways that were unfathomable back when these laws were constructed. And then you add in the potential for politicians to use this against political opponents. This is like nightmare territory, and I don't know what the solution would be. Maybe a higher standard for stochastic violence for people in elected office, but then like what? So if Bernie calls for a political revolution, he gets tried because people are saying revolutions are typically violent, and he must have meant guillotines for all the establishment, class. I don't know. I don't know, Kyle. I'm only scared. That's my feeling is all.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think you're right. And this isn't something I've thought a lot about, but it certainly rings true that, there are some totally unscrupulous, malevolent people out there who do have a lot of power. Alex Jones is the best example of this. Alex Jones is a guy who, he developed this giant following, and he is out of his fucking mind. I've probably covered more Alex Jones than anybody, just because I've been on YouTube since like 2012, and I used to regularly like cover his stuff. And he accused Democratic politicians of being demons and of smelling like sulfur, and like that's my
Many
reaction.
are saying this.
my reaction is the same. Like, I sort of laugh at it and mock it while at the same time understanding that there's maybe 1% of his audience that's just that fucking crazy, where there really are negative consequences associated with it. And even on the Sandy Hook stuff. So he was just found guilty in 4 separate Sandy Hook cases by default, which basically means he just didn't show the documentation that he was legally required to show, which means he was found guilty. In a weird way, Bosch, I actually think that was the best possible outcome. And here's why. Because he's not being found guilty of anything beyond just being found guilty by default. So in other words, because I watched all the things he said about Sandy Hook. He absolutely said it was a hoax. He absolutely said that, this was planned. He said all the conspiracy stuff he 100% said. But he also never said, here's the family members, here's their address, go harass them, call them, do whatever. And so there really was a legal gray area where I don't think you could have found him guilty without really destroying free speech and without really setting a bad precedent. But that's why we got the best of all worlds, because he was still found guilty while we didn't set a negative speech precedent. Because now, I don't know what the punishment's going to be. I don't know if he's going to have to pay millions of dollars to these people. I don't know if maybe
he's
might serve
filing
some
appeal,
time.
I'm pretty sure. We'll see.
Yeah, but he's probably going to lose, because if you don't show your fucking documents, then, and it's hilarious too, because what does Alex Jones say all the time? I got the documents right here, ladies and gentlemen. So I actually think that was the best possible outcome, which is, here's this malicious, malevolent, like really conspiratorial minded person, and he's causing real harm, but he's also not doing it in a direct enough way legally where you can draw the lines back to him and lock him up. But we got him on like a loophole. It's almost like getting whatever that gangster was on tax evasion. The mafia boss who they got on tax evasion. Capone.
I think I imagine the documents might have incriminated him a fair bit, like internally. So he probably thought,
I think you're probably right.
He'll take
or he lied about his finances or whatever. There's
something.
A lot, sure.
I doubt that guy is very scrupulous with his, behind the scenes. Yes, I don't think so. Could be. I don't think so. I think, it's really difficult to make judgments like this. It's in a way almost like the least harmful thing you can do is make a direct threat as one of these big figures, because if you do, you'll be arrested the next day. If you make a direct threat, like, that's it. Your audience will be like, oh, okay, the police will show up. You're fucked. But you can talk around it for ages to essentially the same effect. And this is one of the issues with like threats and defamation targeted at individuals versus targeted at concepts, like Dominion suing for defamation against, all these orgs. Fox News dropped that like a hot iron. OAN and Newsmax have their, they're going to have fun, I think. But the Kraken lady, what's her fucking...
Sidney Powell.
Powell, yeah, fuck her. Yeah, good luck. But so that's because it's Dominion, it's a company. But the electoral process as a concept isn't subject to any kind of legal protection with regards to statements that would be defamatory if they were being levied against a company. The government doesn't have that standard. So
look at Boebert and Ilhan Omar happening right now. Have you been seeing this?
Yeah. Where she called her like
she is
terrorist.
Fucking loathsome. She's telling this. She's just lying, making up these stories. One of them was like, I was standing in the elevator and Ilhan Omar was with me, and somebody was walking to come into the elevator, and Ilhan Omar had a backpack, and I looked at her and said, or she did. Thankfully, no. What she said is she didn't have a backpack, so I was like, "Whew, I'm safe from the jihad squad or whatever." That was one of the stories she told. She told another one. I mean, just flat out blatant, bigoted.
And then everyone
really,
clapped.
This congresswoman is in fucking Al Qaeda. You piece of shit.
It's and that's dangerous. It
stokes hatred of Muslims. I think there's no doubt about that.
Ilhan Omar is if bullets ever do start flying, like assassinations and stuff, Ilhan Omar is really far up there in terms of the people.
I'm sure she needs security all the time.
Yeah. Which is and Republicans don't need any of this shit. It never gets dished out at them, and I'm not saying it should be, by the way, because legitimately I do not want Biden up there doing his best, vaguely threatening sort of stochastic terrorism bit behind a podium. That's not the solution I'm looking for, but it's an element of democratic destabilization for which we currently have absolutely no legal answers and no social answers either, because you don't need everyone to be on board with it. You only need like 10% of the population to be on board with it, and you have millions.
I have hope
of
there,
people.
though. I have hope on a social answer. I really do. And on the social front, look, I think that yes, this country is very divided. It's very partisan out there right now. It's very tribal, but it's also like that because there is a little bit of top-down jerry-rigging of the narrative. And so what happens is we're almost as a distraction, we are forced much more to focus on these endless culture war issues where everybody's at each other's throats. Whereas the reality of the situation, if you look beneath the surface, is what we discussed earlier on, which is, okay, minimum wage. Trump won the state of Florida in 2020. A minimum wage direct ballot initiative also won with 60% of the vote, meaning plenty of people who voted for Trump also wanted a $15 minimum wage. You look at the same thing when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to unions. There's so much support. The numbers are astonishing how much support the union workers are getting against management right now, whether it's John Deere or Kellogg's or whoever. And so there actually is a lot more that unites us than divides us. We just don't know it because nobody fucking talks about it, and nobody says, like, hey, let's cool our jets here a little bit and be rational and talk it out. And I feel like it is possible to get to a point where we do sort of break the fever in a sense and realize that a lot of the fucking arguing over Mr. Potato Head and whatever other culture war bullshit du jour,
theory, Dr. Seuss.
It's just noise on the side. It's all ancillary. And as soon as people realize that, that's when you'll see more class solidarity. That's where you'll see more movement in the right direction and more turning down of the temperature for all the problems that we're talking about now.
Yeah, and I think, and I want, because we're at about 2 hours here, and that passed in the blink of an eye. So I'll say this, and I really appreciate you coming on.
I do want to bring up one more thing when you're done.
Oh yeah,
though.
no, I'm not saying
Okay.
like we're done. I just want to say, like, to finish that in the end. But with regards to that, to me, the best solution was always, like, how should I say? When I talk about progressive issues, I don't think of them as part of the culture war, because I think you can talk about these issues without invoking them in, like, a disingenuous, like, social bickering kind of way. And when you respond to culture war talking points, I often feel like I'm trying to, like, throw water on the fire somebody else started. Like, if I talked about the Mr. Potato Head shit, I didn't want to talk about the fucking Mr. Potato Head.
I'm sure I did too. Yeah, I'm guilty.
Well, I didn't want this. You made me. You made it trend.
Yeah.
So I do hope we can move past it, especially because, like, it is such a good scapegoat for the right. It is insane how good of a scapegoat it is, because their economic positions are indefensible. They've always tried to pivot it away. This is centuries old with immigration, even back in the 1900s. Oh, why are wages low? Well, of course, it must be because of immigrants, not the bosses not paying you. It's clear. Redirect always to something else. So they want to build the wall. So they want to put tariffs on China. It doesn't do anything. Nothing has gotten better. Nothing has changed. The closest thing we've gotten to any meaningful economic improvement lately was Biden cutting child poverty in half, I think, in addition to the broader stimulus that we got during COVID. And was it expensive? Sure. But, we were dealing with COVID. There was a lot.
And it's unfortunately just temporary. But
yeah. Maybe we can normalize that stuff for sort of long-term enjoyment, but we do need to talk about it more. It is a crime that the effects of those policies were newsworthy for a week, and since then, it's just been a nonstop cavalcade of bullshit.
Exactly. Totally right.
At the end of the day, the mainstream Democrats, the establishment Dems, probably benefit from the culture war talking points too, because they know that if they focus too much on the econ stuff, people might wake up to it, and there will be far fewer establishment Dems and far more radical Dems.
Correct.
And because
Correct.
Republicans, going from like a neocon to MAGA, like QAnon shaman shit, that doesn't affect the business class at all. Zero. They still get their cut taxes. Whereas going from Pelosi to Bernie Sanders means a lot for
They know that better than anybody, Vosh.
The donor class.
Which is why they had to fucking try to undermine him in every possible way.
We're being crimped into the fucking culture war discourse from both sides. Anyway, I was rambling there. Sorry.
So here's the thing I wanted to talk about. I figured you were the perfect person to talk about this with. Let me just say, I really enjoy your content. You're one of very few people who I consume fairly regularly. And the reason why I really enjoy your content is because I've talked about this publicly before, I have an aversion. I don't want to hear people tell me what I already know and believe and can make even better arguments for. I like hearing a perspective that's maybe slightly different than mine, but very well thought out and very genuine. And I feel like you bring that. And so I enjoy your content. And like I was listening to the thing you dropped yesterday on like otherkin and what is it called? Neopronouns. And I'm such a boomer. I don't even remember all the things.
Xenogenders was the other
Xenogenders, right. So I figured I'd bring this up to you, and this is a hot take that might get people mad at me, but I want to give you my instinctual reaction to something and then get your response. So for me, the issue of transgenderism was always almost like a duh thing. Like I could very easily wrap my mind around the concept of somebody being biologically born male or female, but then 100% feeling and being convinced that they're the opposite.
Mhm.
To me, from early on when I heard about transgenderism, I was like, yeah, okay, I can see that. Yeah, of course. And it's a real phenomenon. It happens. And so never doubted that for a second. And obviously with, homosexuality too, somebody being gay, to me, that also, I was like, yeah, I could totally see that. It makes perfect sense to me. There are certain ones that intuitively don't make as much sense to me. So, and there was a story that came out the other day that I tweeted about. It's it's basically the new Rachel Dolezal. It's this woman who's a Canadian health minister or Canadian health official, Indigenous health official. And she basically was claiming that she was Indigenous and came out she wasn't at all Indigenous. And the reason why I came out is because I think she was making a big show of being Indigenous. And she did like a TED talk where she was in the traditional garb and stuff. And so I polled my audience and tweeted, I just put the word transracialism and I did a Twitter poll. And 70% said no, and 30% said, sure, why not? And I have to say, my instinct is that I really don't see what's wrong with it. I really think, is it possible, if we agree, and I don't know if you agree with this, in terms of how people perceive race, that's real as a heart attack. And that's why there's discrimination and prejudice and xenophobia and bigotry and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
But if race mostly is a social construct, and it is, well then why can't somebody feel like they're more of another race or another culture? So my gut reaction was transgenderism, totally get it. Transracialism, I kind of get it. The one I actually struggle with is the otherkin shit, where I'm like, I don't know about that, dog. So tell me where I'm wrong and break it down for me, because I'm very open-minded on these things and I'm just giving you my instinctual take and I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. Throw me the hard question next time, huh? Okay.
I love this shit, man. I live for this.
Okay. So, okay. I gotta be careful because it's not like my audience is
You're gonna get canceled now too? Go
yeah,
for
okay.
it.
I think okay. So when it comes to terms like gender and race, we're always fighting. There's a war going on between different interpretations of these ideas and where these boundaries and constructs lie. Historically, gender and sex, at least in the West, kind of meant the same thing. I mean, we didn't distinguish the terms. There was men and women in most Western cultures for some time. And, they didn't think a person was a man or a woman because of chromosomes, because they didn't know what that was. They just thought there was some sort of spiritual distinction because of God,
right?
And now we have, a biological distinction and then a social distinction. And as time has moved on, we question the utility of these definitions. And with gender, I think it's in this weird flux where more and more people are deciding that whatever social roles come along with gender are just kind of meaningless. Like they're just not even really worth it. Just 60 years ago, guys couldn't have long hair or earrings. And nowadays, you have boys walking around looking like girls. And I don't mean trans people. I just mean boys walking around looking like girls. And butch lesbians have looked like boys since the 80s. So, and I just think they don't care as much. With race, I think there's a lot of difficulty here, I think, because I don't have anything necessarily against transracialism in one respect. Do you know the Channel 5 YouTube channel?
Yes, and I think I saw the video that you did on the
the Hoff twins, the two.
Oh no, maybe I didn't see this.
Oh, they're these two. It's just there's two. Okay, there we go. All right, it's reconnecting.
Okay.
My chat will
Gotcha.
come back in a second. It's, YouTube video player isn't always reliable. Anyway, like this, for example, sometimes black people who grow up in white neighborhoods are accused of being like white, or what's the term, Oreos, like they're white on the inside.
Right.
And likewise, you have white boys who grow up in like the projects who get the opposite accusation. Now, obviously, the way we speak, the language we use, this is totally social. So, a black person who grows up in Beverly Hills among other like white people is probably going to talk more like me. And a white person who grows up in like East LA is going to talk, more like, well, black people who grew up in East LA. So in those cases, I think there's a kind of transracialism if you think of race as the social expectations and coded like cultural behaviors that we associate with race,
Right.
as opposed to like the skin tone and stuff like that. In a way, it's almost like you have race split into two concepts: the cultural and the perceived genetic. In the way you have sex and gender, you know, one of them is a product of different skin tone, face shape, height, maybe, and the other is all the social mores that go with it. So I think depending, but we don't have two terms for that. We just have race. We don't have like the sex version of race and the gender version of race. We just have race, which is, you know what I mean?
I
Um,
do. You are making a distinction there, which is one that I hadn't thought of.
so I guess maybe language just has to evolve there. But
So,
oh yeah, sorry.
all I was going to say was, so I understand why people would initially be very hesitant to the idea when you have somebody like Rachel Dolezal, who, you know, is basically claiming this experience that she didn't have. But at the same time, she also like, didn't she like rise to the top of the NAACP, and she was doing good work for the black community? And then, so I
Mhm.
think what my point is like, so like if Eminem came out tomorrow and was like, I'm black, would people really be like, that's fucking outrageous? Or would the majority of people be like, yeah, we kind of thought that?
I think right now people would think it's outrageous, but I wouldn't be surprised if in 20 or 30 years this is more normalized. Now, I don't think people are going to like transition races biologically, like
Right. I don't think they'll do that either.
right,
Right.
like
Yeah.
skin darkening or lightening
Yeah.
or
No,
whatever.
no,
Yeah,
no.
but because there seems to be something else about sexual transition where there are like impetuses that drive us towards that outside of just a
Right.
desire to conform to given social rules, though that's a part of it. With the race stuff, though, I do think that with time there might be a change to how we perceive that kind of stuff, because isn't there like a sort of an inarticulation there when we talk about race? What are we talking about when we say somebody is acting black? What the fuck does that mean? Because I grew up in Beverly Hills around black people, and they can be as posh as anyone else. And you know, you can find white, you know, boys often in Skid Row, and they're the opposite in every meaningful way, at least culturally. I'd consider them black, but we just have the one term. Maybe with time, the Rachel Dolezal thing isn't going to be a social problem. It's because it's true that right now when we think of like the validity of leading the NAACP, part of it is whether or not you've experienced discrimination along the lines of your race, which if you're white pretending to be black might not be as applicable. But at the same time, TERFs make that argument about trans women, that you can't be a real woman because the first 18 years of your life or so were set enjoying male
Yeah.
privilege. So
That's what I struggled with, Vosh, is that every time I thought about the transracial issue, I couldn't think of an objection that wouldn't also apply to trans issues. And I was like, well, no, I know for a fact transgenderism is real. I know it. So, and maybe the argument against transracialism is this idea that, like, well, at this late date, wouldn't we have so many more open examples of it? You know what I mean? Like, when it comes to transgender folks, they've existed forever. Like, all these societies have had versions of trans people. And whereas with transracial stuff, it's like, well, what do we have? Rachel Dolezal, Elizabeth Warren pretending for 3.5 seconds, and now this random indigenous minister in Canada. If it was a real phenomenon, maybe an argument is, empirically speaking, there'd just be way more examples of it already. But in terms from an intellectual perspective, when I look at, and I'd be very interested to poll the trans community on this, to what extent do people in the trans community think the reason they're trans is biological or cultural or both? And then, but when it comes to the race thing, it strikes me as like, since race isn't real in any meaningful sense, to be transracial would definitionally have to be just cultural and not also biological, correct?
yeah, well, yeah, unless they wanted to go the whole like Michael Jackson route, I guess. I no, I actually agree. I really do think that given enough time, there might be a shift in perspective on this. I think it's just a matter of language expanding. The best historical analogy that I can think of is the Vikings were fairly culturally tolerant, right? When you think of Vikings, you think of like Nordic types, right? And usually when the Vikings or the Scandinavians were spoken of in older literature, it was as much a national as it was a racial distinction. Because,
Mm.
you know, there wasn't much in the way of like global travel back then, but there were black Scandinavians even back then. Moors picked up during travels to the south and brought upward. So in that respect, you know, the term Scandinavian at once applies and doesn't apply to some of the non-white Vikings who might have been brought north. And I doubt they would have had a way of linguistically parsing that either. So it might just be like culture and language not catching up to each other properly, you know?
And what about the otherkin thing? Have you ever had a conversation with somebody who's otherkin?
Yeah, but only online.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that one because I'd love to know where they think it comes from and what exactly is it.
I my understanding, at least this is how I understand it, is that I don't really believe in a spirit. So I don't believe the whole like you have a wolf spirit in you or whatever. To, you are what you are. When I think of it, I think of it as like a strong identification with some non-human thing in the way that a lot of historical figures might have aligned themselves with abstract concepts or ideas. We do this in literature a lot. People might be the Leviathan, the dragon, the lion. There are figures who have been named as such. And now sometimes, this is just a purple prose, a turn of phrase, and that's fine. But sometimes I think that people, they internalize that because they feel like there's some descriptive utility to that with regards to their personality. Like, what does saying you're a wolf mean about you? I mean, there are character traits we associate with being a wolf, right? I mean, when I think of a wolf, I think like, fierce, independent, blah blah, whatever. Um, to be honest, I don't know how deeply held these beliefs always are, because sometimes it's going to be people who are adults and they care about it very very much, and some of them it's going to be like 14-year-olds on Tumblr who don't. It's just like a way of
Right.
experimenting with their identity, and it's hard for me to parse out the exact level of involvement, but I just try to think of it as like a strong identification with the traits associated with that animal, and if it's more than that to them, they would have to explain it to me.
Yeah, because I could totally see this like very gut level instinctual feeling of somebody who's born biologically male and feels female, or born biologically female and feels male, or even that instinctual gut feeling of somebody who's born with white skin but they feel like they're Latino or black or whatever. But I struggle to wrap my mind around the idea that you're human and you feel like a deer or something. It's just and maybe it's something I'm missing, but and the other thing is, and you sort of touched on this in the video the other day, is like the right almost like the right made these arguments way back in the day, like, oh, you're gonna have gay marriage? Well, what do you want to marry your dog next, bro? And like it was they would extrapolate things to this absurd degree, and we would be like, obviously that's not going to happen. But when it comes to like, well, now I identify as a rhino or whatever, it's like, aren't some people actually doing that and carrying it to this absurd level where at some point you have to question, like, is the experience of somebody who claims to be an animal equivalent to or equal to the feeling of somebody who's biologically male and now they're a trans woman? I would say no. I would say the feeling of the trans woman is so much more real and like ironclad, and it's that whole experience. Whereas with somebody who says they're an animal, I just sort of want to be like, you're not an animal.
I think I agree with your conclusion, but not how you got there. To me, it's not about which is more real. Maybe the dysphoria element of being trans, like that's like a sort of medically quantifiable thing. But to me, it's more about along what lines are people being attacked, you know? I tend to think of progressive issues as a kind of united front, much in the same way that otherkins have been attacked by the same people who attack trans people. Not saying you, I mean, like, because like you said, they'll relate all of it. It'll be like, oh, what's next? People will identify as attack helicopters. And the easy defense,
joke.
right, yeah. The easy defense is to say, well, no, of course not. It's just within the gender binary, and there's also non-binary people, that sort of thing. But I think more broadly, it's an argument about consent. At the end of the day, the categories we're talking about here, whether they're socially established ones like gender or not really socially established ones like otherkin, though different cultures have had things that are kind of like otherkin. I mean, Native Americans.
Oh, that's interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
So like not exactly the same, but at least parallel. But whether or not we're talking about this, that, or the other, these are all completely arbitrary social categories. I don't know if there's more validity to the gender one than the otherkin one. We just chanced into a situation where one of them was taken more seriously than the other. So
Right. Is that my social conditioning that's led me to that conclusion? And I don't know. That's why I'm sort of putting this out there and we're talking it through.
I think so, but I think what that means is because it's cared about more, even if arbitrarily, that means it's okay to focus efforts on that more. I cringe tremendously when I see otherkins saying like, we're part of the trans struggle. If you're anti-otherkin, you're anti-trans. And the answer to that, at least from my perspective, is come on. Like I can respect who you are and what you believe, but there aren't anti-otherkin bathroom bills being pushed. There aren't otherkin bans from the military. We know where the hammer is being brought down. So to me, it's not a matter of what's more valid or true or empirically defensible. It's just a matter of where you put your energies defending it. And for me, the argument will always be, unless you can prove somebody is being harmed here, I will not care. And with the case of otherkin or whatever, it's outlandish to me. I admit, I don't get it. I can understand it abstractly, as an intellectual problem. But as a personal thing, I'm comfortable with who I am. But as long as they're not harming people, I think they have a fundamental American right to that kind of self-identification. Maybe in 100 years, it'll just be like, horoscopes or zodiac signs, oh, I'm such an Aquarius. Oh, I'm such a giraffe. I don't know. They do that in China. They have the year of the dragon and the year of the ox, and that is meant to reflect in your personality. In Japan, it's blood types. They think AB and O minus and O positive are like character traits, kind of. So it's all arbitrary. It's just a matter of what we lucked into.
I do feel very similar in one way. Like on the one hand, I feel like my position is very clear when it comes to this stuff, which is live and let live. You do whatever you want to do as long as you're not hurting anybody else. And it quite literally is not hurting anybody else. So it's like, fine, go right ahead. I just the struggle that I run into is like when I try to relate it back to transgenderism, even transracialism, which I know even the majority of my own audience is like, fuck off when I say that. But I feel like I don't intuitively grasp it as much. And the other thing is I do feel like oftentimes maybe these things develop in a situation where people maybe turn a little too inward and care too much about themselves personally, to the point where it gets to be almost an unhealthy obsession, as opposed to sort of turning outward a little bit and looking more at the world and diagnosing what's going on in the world and trying to change the world. There are some things that could be an unhealthy personal obsession, which might lead you down roads that you wouldn't otherwise go down, and an unhealthy personal obsession where you're like trapped in your own mind and just thinking about yourself and your identity too much. I think that can be very negative for people. And I think a lot of people go through streaks in their life where they're like, I certainly did, to certain points in my life where I almost turned too inward and cared too much about what's going on in my own head and not enough about what's going on in the world. And so I would just caution people to, turn outward more as well, and don't just think about yourself and your identity and your place in the world and all that stuff. Does that make sense?
No, I agree. I think often we're tempted towards over categorization when we feel uncertain about our place in the world, where we want to break down everything that we are and segment it into a bunch of descriptive traits, social cliques, and other like broader things. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Giving name to ideas can help us understand ourselves better, but a hyperfixation on it, I think, can indicate that you're looking for a kind of external validation, like you weren't comfortable with you until it was thoroughly dissected and labeled. And to me, that can be a self-destructive process. It makes it difficult to grow and change when you've made what you are now not just a part of your identity, but like a figure, like a trophy to yourself,
And I think that can come in two separate ways. It could come from trauma that leads somebody to do that, but it could also come from the opposite, which is, I forget what it's called. Is it called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where like the very top of it is like self-actualization, which is a stand-in for like identity.
The bottom's like survival stuff. Yeah.
Correct. So I feel like that instinct can come either from having all your needs met in a way where you're sufficiently okay, and then you are concerned almost too much with the self-actualization aspect of it, or it could come from the opposite, where maybe your environment is chaos and there's nothing that's stable, that you turn inward almost as a coping mechanism to escape that.
I think there are a lot of reasons you can sort of really fixate on these labels and these forms of identity. I think I agree with you. I don't think it describes everyone, but I have noticed that for a lot of people, they tend to delve into this very granular self identification, either if they face no struggle in life or if they face quite a lot of it. I know
That's
trauma,
right.
yeah, sometimes trauma can invite people to engage in a lot of introspection to feel like they have control over whatever it is that traumatized them to begin with.
Mm,
And at the same time, like, we all know now, I don't think this is largely an otherkin thing, but there's like a trope of like the decadent bourgeois who, having had everything, now finds increasingly like self-destructive ways of satiating their feeling of self and their belonging. I don't think that it's destructive to be otherkin or whatever. So it's more of like a broader trend, I guess, like, today I will go to Epstein's island, say they, stuff like that. I'm not equivocating those two, only saying that I agree that sometimes like a desire to move beyond sort of a satisfaction with yourself can, yeah, come from trauma or satiation. Yeah.
gotcha.
Sorry.
Well, if I get canceled over my transracialism take, let me know. Because
Yeah, if I get canceled over saying "let's go to Epstein's island" clipped out of context, then I'll let you know. Okay,
that'll
wait.
happen.
I'm glad that you brought this up. I actually am really glad that I got to talk about this with you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, these are things that like I think about stuff like this, but my show is not really the forum for me to. I mean, it's weird. How am I going to do a fucking monologue on this? I need you to bounce ideas off of when it comes to this stuff, because I need other perspectives. Because I admit up front, this is not something that I'm well versed in. I'm just giving you what my instinctual reaction has been to this sort of stuff, and so it's good to like lay that as the groundwork, and then sort of let you develop on that, and then let me digest some of the points you made. Like you made a really good point, that landed with me about the distinction, the difference between with transgenderism and transracialism in terms of like there's a cultural and a biological aspect on one side, and on the other side there's just a cultural aspect. So there is a real difference there in some sense,
I think, look, whatever the line may be, uh, every time you're mentioned when I'm live streaming, there is a cavalcade of people in my chat saying, oh, Kyle got me into the left. I mean, every time, just an absolute tidal wave of people for whom you were the entry point. So in terms of, where this can be discussed or whatever, apparently whatever it is you do leads people towards hearing about me ramble about otherkin otherwise. So maybe it's not as foreign to your community as you might worry.
Well, no, it's not. It's not foreign to some percentage of my community. Correct. You're right. It's not foreign to them. It's foreign in terms of the content I would cover on my show. You know what I mean? Like for me, it's more economics, foreign policy, more those sorts of things. But that doesn't mean I'm not somewhat interested in it. It doesn't mean I don't like stimulating and interesting conversations like we're having on it right now. It's very, very useful.
Yeah, and rare that I get them too. I think we're at 2.5 hours now. My ADHD riddled audience will barely have time to watch this on the bus ride back from high school. Over the next week. I massively appreciate you coming on. It's been a delight, and honestly, it's been long overdue. Everyone watching already knows this, but obviously, Kyle's Secular Talk on YouTube. I assume they knew that. Thank you for coming on. Seriously.
Thank you, man. My pleasure. It was a great conversation. And yeah, keep up the good work. I enjoy watching your stuff. And just keep doing, again, the thing I love is when people aren't like, I don't want to listen to somebody who's 100% agreement with me all the time, because I'm me. I know what I think and what I say and the arguments. And you're not exactly with me, but there's enough overlap where there's a lot of relatability, but there's enough difference where it's really interesting to me. And you're obviously very thorough and thoughtful. So keep doing what you do.
As long as we're on lockstep on the otherkin issue, that's where it really counts. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, man. You too. Have a good one.
Take care. Yeah, I'd say that was a good ass convo. I really like Kyle. I have some disagreements with him, but I quite like Kyle. I'm just gonna get this in while we have the audience. Sub to my channel, you buffoons. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. Make the like counter go up. Seriously though, do sub to the channel. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. If you're here because you're a fan of Kyle Kulinski, but not so much myself, Kyle likes me, so you should too. There you go. I also have the Vosh Pit, my second channel, which has been doing stupid good lately. So you should go. Clearly, the mandate of the masses indicates that the content there is good. So you should go look there too. And also subscribe with all of your YouTube accounts. You know, really get those numbers up. Um, anyway, I thought that was a good convo. I know there were some people in my audience, as I could see from the chat, who wanted me to like tear into him, which was obviously not what the conversation was going to be. If you've heard me talk about the issues we disagree on before, then you know where I stand. So I feel like my due diligence is made there. A lot of the people in chat were also like seemed to be quite disappointed when he was like saying he's pro transgender, transracial, but he used the term transgenderism. You know, I'm sorry, not all of us can be completely in on the hyper progressive lefty Twitter discourse. I think he's quite progressive. I don't think there's any denying that. He's just, yeah, you, you know, um, he's yeah. Um, I said transgenderism like early in the like up until about a year into streaming, I'm pretty sure. Um, so yeah, it was progressive back then. Um, Remind me that Kyle still believes Assad didn't use chemical weapons onto citizens and that Gray Zone isn't paid off by the Russian government. Vosh cringe. Yeah, we do have disagreements. I think that Kyle is a remarkably kind and trusting person. I think that he has a lot of faith in the people around him. And as such, I think that he is uh, unlikely to severely challenge perspectives given to him sometimes when they come from people close to him or from people that he trusts. Like with the Assad stuff, I feel that it's more like he's heard some of these issues and he has these opinions, but not like I don't think he's like a principled Assad defender. You can see the content he's made on Assad and the Syria thing versus the content the Gray Zone has made, and I think there's a critical difference in the way that it's handled. Even though I disagree quite a bit with both, I think there's a critical difference between the impression I get from the Gray Zone, where it's like a very disingenuous effort to destabilize the United States through supporting Russia's geopolitical interests, and Kyle, who is genuinely opposed to U.S. war profiteering and is coming at it from that angle. Do you understand the difference? I hope you understand what I'm saying. Like, even though I disagree with Kyle on this, I do. I genuinely think it's because he actually does not want people um, doing the whole, promoting the military interventionist perspective. Um, yeah. No, I think he's quite genuine. 100%. Anyway, um, we had ourselves a good conversation. 2.5 hours. That really did pass quite quickly. My God. Um, Geez. Well, I've got some good news and some bad news. Let me go ahead and use the restroom really quick, and then I'll deliver both. Yeah, I wonder how many people would need to piss into a toilet all at once at the same time to overflow it. Because you know how the like tank in the back will distribute the water level in order to like it'll get like if you pour a bucket of water into a toilet, it will lower the water level down. Um, but if you had like 15 people peeing, I wonder if you could like overflow it, you know? Right? Was this the bad news? No. Well, the good news is that I love you guys. The bad news is that I'm afraid I'm going to read donos, and I'll have to do the rest of the stream segments tomorrow. I had to wake up quite early for the Al Jazeera interview this morning. The Al Jazeera interview was at 7 a.m. So I had to wake up at 6 a.m. But I actually woke up at 5 a.m. So that was, quite early. I also didn't expect to talk to Kyle for 2.5 hours, but I'm happy that I did, so I don't complain about that at all. The Al Jazeera interview went well, I think, even though it was quite early. I was quite tired. I was, average Bosch 2-hour stream. The stream has been going on right now for nearly 3 hours. Thank you. Can you elaborate on transracialism a bit quick? Sure, what do you want me to elaborate on? Just my perspective? Please never talk about transracialism again. Sure, I'll explain it again in a manner that you will all agree with. Okay. So, let's make a distinction between sex and gender in broader terms that we can apply to race as well, okay? We'll talk about the cultural form, and we'll talk about the physical form. Sex is physiological, and gender is cultural, or social, whatever you prefer. Let's just say social form and physical form. Now, race has the same distinction. There is a physical form to race, and there is a social form. When we talk about a person acting like, acting white, acting black, we're referring, of course, to the social form. We're not saying they're acting like their skin tone is darker or lighter than it actually is. Clearly, there's a distinction there. There are some critical differences, though. First of all, as far as I understand, there's no such thing as racial dysphoria in the way that there's gender dysphoria for sex and gender. So gender dysphoria, as I understand it, is kind of a misnomer because it really refers to a desire to adjust sexual characteristics. When people say like feeling dysphoric, often they're referring to like, well, I wish my genitals were different. I wish I didn't have to shave every morning. I wish my hips were differently shaped, that kind of stuff. So let's just use the term dysphoria to refer to a desire to change the physical form. As opposed to the social form. Of course, social dysphoria is very much a thing, but let's talk about the physical element of things. Now, I've actually met people with racial dysphoria. To my knowledge, there isn't really a recognized trend of people feeling severe discomfort with the physical attributes associated with their race and wishing that it would be a different set of physical attributes. Now, it's possible that some people experience this, but I don't know if it's distinct enough in relation to race for it to be considered racial dysphoria, as opposed to a general discomfort with one's body, dysmorphia, which people can experience regardless of their gender identity. There are another couple of key issues. First of all, sex is bimodal. It's essentially a spectrum on a single line, a one-dimensional, line. Whereas race doesn't really work like that. There isn't like a line and the race is here and then on the other side. And it's like, oh, well, if you're this far along, you're white. And if you're this far along, you're Asian. If you're this far along, you're black. That's not how it works. People place on like a racial spectrum isn't a single line. It's a huge, complicated Klein distribution. Which means that it's really difficult to make these direct attributions. The final critical difference between the physical form of race and the physical form of sex is that what we call being intersex is very, very common. In fact, it's the norm with race. See, the thing is, uh, sex distributions are bimodal. You have a line with two, means, or sorry, two modes, two places where people tend to settle, male and female. Whereas with race, not really. It's a full spectrum. There aren't two modes. It's not even it's like the distribution is practically flat. It's just like flat across. I'm too dumb to understand this. Break out the paint. Sure, that's fine. Here, look, real quick. Um if we were to graph this out, you could see it like this, where on a line, one moment. There we go. Okay, there's graph 1 and there's graph 2. Okay. Where over here on the top for sex, you have it's not quite like that exactly, but let's say it's more or less like that. With over here you have male coded sexual traits, and over here you have female coded sexual traits. The vast majority of people fit pretty closely with these. There are intersex people and ambiguous people. They're a minority, though. That doesn't mean they don't matter. But they're, not the majority of people, I think. Now, with regards to race, here's how the racial distribution looks, okay? It's like... Now, can you tell me where the modes are on this graph? I guess the mode's right here in this example, but, this isn't, usually when people talk about gender dysphoria, like a desire to change their sexual attributes, they say they're like here, and they want to move like here, or vice versa. Sometimes there are people who just want to land in the ambiguous zone, and that's totally valid. But for the most part, people want to exchange where they are on the means. In this case, let's say here is meant to represent Australian Aborigine. And then here's Pacific Islander, and then here, and this is wildly oversimplified. It couldn't even be a single line. It would have to be like a three-dimensional chart. And then let's say this is Asian, and this is go to where? Where goes to where? What does that mean? Racial dysphoria? Where does that refer? Where the fuck what does that mean? Where? You know what I mean? It's the way that race is different to the way sex is. Even though both of them are the physical form, there are differences in terms of how we would treat dysphoria if it were to emerge in these contexts. Now, with all of that being said, let's say, let's ignore then the physical element of things. Let's talk about the social element. Is racial dysphoria along a social line a real thing? My answer to this is a clear and unambiguous yes. If you talk to people of any race in areas around people of other races, there is a very often a clear discomfort with the apparent disconnect between the perception people have of their identity based on their perceivable physical race and their actual self-identity in terms of their personality and the things they care about. This happens a lot with mixed race people. If you're half black and half white, and there are social pressures encouraging you to behave in disparate directions, how do you manage that? That's why a lot of black people know how to code switch. I don't code switch that often, okay? If I'm talking in a fancy restaurant, I guess I won't use as many euphemisms as I normally do, but apart from that, I pretty much talk like this 24/7. Even my professional calls, I don't really have to. That's not race, though. That's culture. Yes, we're talking about the social form associated with race. But if you're black, the difference between how you talk with your friends, your parents, your teachers, and your coworkers might be massive. And in a way, this is a kind of distributed cultural affect along race. Does that make sense? So in this respect, can a person be transracial only with regards to the cultural form of race, in the same way people can be transgender only in the social form? After all, are there not trans women who never engage in any medical transition, who continue to have a penis, who don't take HRT, but they still identify as women? We treat them like women, don't we? Because they are women. So if we're talking about the social form for sex and gender, We can then talk about the social form for race comparably. Are there people in that situation, uh, you know, along racial lines? And the answer to me is yes, absolutely. What I find cringe about people like Rachel Dolezal is that they've sort of adopted the physical transition, the physical transracialism, in a context that seems inappropriate, considering our social norms and expectations at the moment. But that might change with time, you know. That might be different in the future. I genuinely don't know. After all, like, what do you guys think? Do you think like Dolezal was like evil and deceptive? I don't think so. I'm pretty sure she believed it too. Like, right? If you take a like Dolezal's entire life, I don't think it was like some weird deceptive operation. Like, yes, I'll spend my whole life pretending to be black and also supporting black social causes. I don't I don't really think so. I don't think she was lying like deliberately. I think she thought of herself as black. So in that respect, is what she's doing fundamentally any different than a trans woman thinking of themselves as a woman, rightfully so, even if they haven't physically transitioned? And to me, the only real distinction that I can arrive at between those two things is one of these is socially accepted and the other isn't. A lot of people interpret this as an attack on the legitimacy of transgender people, but I encourage you not to. I don't think it is. I just think it's an acknowledgement that if you're taking a look at the physical form and the social form here, you know, uh, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of weird social confusion. There's a level of social capital associated, though. Yeah. Well, same with gender and sex. I mean, TERFs will say that as well, right? As a Spokenite, she was a shitter, Vosh, and lied and even falsified documents about discrimination. Look it up. Follow this closely. It could well be the case that she lied about some of that stuff. I would need to look into it. I don't really know much about the Dolezal case. The point that I'm trying to make is that I don't think a person like Dolezal must necessarily be acting out of deceit. I think it's entirely possible to think, to yeah, you're using race for things that aren't even race. Okay, Picasso 2X, follow through with me here. You have the physical form and the social form, okay? So gender characteristics aren't necessarily tied to sex. But that doesn't mean that a person can't be trans if they adopt the social affect and role and name of the gender associated with the other sex. The social form and the physical. Wouldn't that be ethnicity instead of race? No. Ethnicity doesn't mean the cultural the cultural form associated to race. Ethnicity is close, but that's not exactly the same thing. If you would only look at the physical form without the social form, there wouldn't be much to talk about. Yeah, but would you use that as an excuse to invalidate trans women or men? Isn't ethnicity biological? No, not necessarily. Could just be normalized. Mikase. There we go. Anyway, do we understand? But being a part of a culture isn't a race. This is literally only because America has always grouped black people together. No, there are correlations between race and cultural ascriptions in pretty much every country on earth, I'm afraid. I'd like it if there weren't, but no, that's pretty much the case. Even if there wasn't one homogenous African American group in the US, which there isn't, by the way, different cities will have different African Americans. There's always granular levels of nuance. The even if you had constituent groups of 50 different types of black people from different African countries, there would still be the same cultural affect and physical affect. What's up?
I wanted to show you. You have time? Or you...
What is it? Time sensitive?
No,
Oh, what is it?
I just found maggots in my mushrooms.
Why? That's gross.
Because they're flies that eat mushrooms.
But that's bad.
No, it's fine. They only eat mushrooms.
They're
They'll just die.
you're showing me like the physical representation of pestilence. You know
It's
that,
a
right?
baby fly.
Yeah?
Yeah? Coward? What's a baby fly?
Vermin found mushroom maggots in the mushrooms
Ooh.
they picked.
Ooh. They're called like scaria larvae.
Now, I have an innate aversion to maggots because I learned from my ancestors. But here, wait, hold on. Block my face here, there. Now it'll
I
maybe
thought they were cute.
put your hand over my face. That's the best. Yeah, there.
Ew.
Now I hate this.
Look at them. I love them.
Chad is throwing up.
Well, they're cowards. They're little
They're
babies.
literally. It's literally the.
Look, I'm catching them so they don't fuck with my spore prints. They were leaving little tracks in them.
Okay, this is not improving. Vermin's spore prints are very cute. There we go, Mr. Bill. That's what I like to say. They can be gross and cute. No, the prints are cute. The maggots are not cute. Hold on. I think this one's already been shown off, but I do think these look quite nice. There's a lot of natural beauty in the underside of the mushroom. The way they're little frills at the bottom. Okay. We had ourselves our talk. Now we have to run through donations. It's already 3 hours into the stream anyway. Okay. Americans89, thank you for the tier 1 sub. Thank you. Beer Bash Johnson with the tier 2 sub. Here to see if we get any golden Nosball vortex moments. The thing that makes me distinguish Kyle Kulinski from a lot of other people who I put in that track is that Kyle Kulinski is absolutely a progressive. I don't think you can talk your way around that. Kyle Kulinski is undeniably a progressive. And I think he's quite clear about it, you know? So I'm not as concerned there. Posadas John, thank you so much for the 3 gifted tier 1 subs. I really appreciate that. Shout out to the Vimps, the Voshite Imps. Ah, yes, the Demon Mama Vosh gang. Shout out. Bear, thank you for the $5. Kindred Reveler, thank you for the very kind $10. Do you think a cisgender person can still be transsexual? As in identify with their birth gender but still get bottom surgery? Bottom surgery? That's, well, I've never... First of all, yes, it's categorically possible if unlikely. I've never heard of that happening. I have heard of cisgender people, however, taking hormones as a way of androgenizing or feminizing themselves while still identifying as what they were assigned at birth, you know? I do know that's a thing. I doubt that's very common, though. Because there can be side effects to those hormones, you know? I mean, welcome side effects, I think, but a lot to deal with, I think. Real-Time Dark Legend and Sate Heartwing, thank you for the $5 both. Vosh, can you ask Kyle why he lied about the DNC hack being a leak? He pushed a story that wasn't true and never took the YouTube video down. I'm really sorry. I'm not familiar with all the drama. I'm sure there are lots of things Kyle Kulinski has done that I wouldn't agree with. But I don't know the context behind all of it. And I also don't want to bring him on just to grill him. I don't think there's much utility to that. I mean, like, I bring him on, you know, I'm having a good convo and it's like, all right, here are 17 things you've done wrong. Like, imagine if he did that with me. It's not like I haven't done things wrong. Like, he's like, all right, what about your take here? What about you know, like, I don't think it's conducive to good discourse, I think. Still alive, thank you for the $5. Yes, we got to fight the Doomer pill. Godwins 101, thank you for the $5. Assad gave up the sarin gas. He never gave up chlorine gas that was used in the attack in question. I don't even know when the gas was taken away. It'd probably be more common if bottom surgery got more advanced or easier in the future. Cis people talking about switching genders all the time. That's true. I know so many cis women who have talked about wanting a dick. A lot of them because they want to escape having periods. And And a lot of them, I think, just because they think it looks fun. Bricklayer, thank you for the incredibly kind 5 gifted tier 1 subs. I really appreciate that. Vosh, how dare you not mention the recent leftist victories in Honduras, Alabama, and Denmark in your stream title? What are you, a game streamer? Sorry, we're a secular talk orbiter now. Just collecting my cloud points. Thank you. Godwin's 101 and Tane, thank you for the tier 1 subs both. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Godwings. Really unfortunate. Thank you for the gifted tier 1 sub. Satan is Axolotl, thank you for the tier 1 sub yourself. Did you see Curtis Connor's bit in his latest video about the importance of public transport and city planning? No, I haven't caught up on Curtis Connor in a bit. Did you know he's my Twitter oomphy? I'm really proud of this one, guys. This one I'm proud of. I'm taking that W to heart. What's oomphy? Means you both follow each other. I'm taking that one. I'm most proud of H-Bomb and Contra. Yeah, Vermin, it's so cool. I will say I've heard way more cis women say they'd want a penis than cis men say they want a vagina. And I'm guessing that's probably because we all have buttholes, you know? So, like, if you have a penis and you want a sex organ that allows you to get slammed, you have already, I guess it's not a sex organ, like, technically, but, I mean, there's a prostate, so I'm not saying it's exactly the same. I'm only saying that, you know, for a lot of people, I think that'll satiate any curiosity. Yes. Boy Meets Mini, thank you for the tier 2 sub. Really appreciate that. Sparkle Fairy with the gifted tier 1 sub. Darth Bennyip, thank you for the tier 2 sub. Cadser with the tier 1 sub. SFMTX123, thank you for the tier 1 sub. Casual Bribery with the tier 4 sub. Thank you so goddamn much. I really, really appreciate that. My female friend just says she wants the convenience of peeing standing up and basically anywhere. I think if you're courageous enough, you can piss anywhere you want with a vagina, you know? Like, you just have to do some, like, Neo in the Matrix, like, hip bend backwards bullshit, okay? But you can do it. It takes effort, though. Yeah, it takes effort, but I believe in you. I believe in you guys. Yeah, 100%. You need to, like, no dude can spray. No, just, like, you have to maintain your center of balance, okay? Knees forward, okay? Crouch, legs open, lean forward, but put, like, thrust hip upward. You could do it, I think. I mean, you'll look like an insane person as opposed to me. I could just stand up straight, but John Barleek with the $5. Ask him who hungry. I think I basically did that. Andrew thanks the 2 Canadian. Sake Tanuki with the incredibly kind $10. I really appreciate that. I'm highly familiar with Kyle's opinions and woefully disappointed with the single level analysis and enabling of destructive individuals, Crystal and JD. It does mostly seem like what most of my community takes issue with regards to Kyle is the people Kyle talks to and is friends with and kind of signal boosts. He is very much a bridge. I meant that when I said that. Like, I feel like he's got, you know, he has a lot of, like, ties. Yeah, Shu is similar. Shu knows so many people. I like Kyle a lot. Did you ask him where that came from? No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Because I knew I wouldn't be able to resist saying it out loud. Palm Tree Nirvana and Kendall Sumler, thank you for the $10 both. I really appreciate that. There's another UK YouTuber worth seeing, H Bomber Guy. Specifically his breakdown of the original anti-vax paper. Palm Tree, I am enormously flattered by your belief that I don't know who H Bomber Guy is. But yes, I also do quite like him. Thank you. No, yes, I quite like H Bomber Guy. His videos are very nice. And yes, his video on vaccines is spectacular for sure. A Kendall Sumler, thank you for the 10. I don't agree with transracial ideas. However, as a mixed person, I grew up with my white family in a white community. As a kid, I struggled with the fact that I am black too. I am happy now, of course. Well, I'm happy to hear that, at least. Happy ending, you know? Well, not ending. You're still alive, but yeah. Nether, Fair Devs and Django Geek, thank you for the $5 all. I really, really appreciate that. Why does Voshega emote look more like you than you do? Also, who made it? I made the Voshega emote. Thank you. Very true, Nether. Race in America was specifically constructed to be a class hierarchy, so transitioning across race is implicitly transitioning across social class as well. There's an element of truth to that with regards to gender, I think, though the class divide is stronger along racial lines, certainly today. Yerok Jelaine, thank you for the $5. Elsie, thank you for the tier 1 sub. Left is best with a very kind $20. Voting rights need to be a priority. Statehood for Puerto Rico and DC ASAP. That would be good. If Puerto Rico wants it, of course, if they consent. Absolutely. Welcome to the world. Thank you for the $25. I really appreciate that. Great discussion today. By the way, don't need to do a segment, but would highly recommend watching part of the looping 11-hour video Tim Heidecker did spoofing Rogan. Yeah, Tim Heidecker has apparently been making fun of a bunch of conservatives recently. With a bunch of stand-up specials. I tweeted a segment of one of these recently before realizing it was even Tim Heidecker. I didn't even recognize him because I'm so used to seeing him from the Tim and Eric days. Let me see if I can find it. If I can take a look at my media retweets. Does it include retweets? Here we go. Here we go. No, it's not a retweet. Thank goodness. Okay, here we go. He's a registered DSA member? Really? He's been like satirizing like conservative comedy. Oh, right. It would probably help if Twitter was not muted.
I went into a restaurant to get a cheeseburger the other day. I said, "Can I get a cheeseburger?" This guy behind the counter goes, "Oh, well, we only have veggie burgers, man. With Brussels sprouts and this and that and turkey, not turkey, fuck." I went.
Is he not parroting the comedian that we made fun of in a video like 3 weeks ago? Isn't he parroting that guy, the cringe comedian? He's literally like, I actually thought it was that guy when I first watched it because I didn't remember what the first guy looked like. Oh yeah, right, pigeon. Blum blum blum. Wheeze. When they lick up water from like the bathtub, it gets in their nose and they wheeze after they're done. It fucking hork, yeah, dusty little fucking cough. The Artemy will like drink from the fucking bathtub, you know, and then he'll just like walk to the other corner of the bathtub and cough for a minute. He's an idiot. We can't help it. He's stupid. We don't. What can we do? Just wheeze over there. Oh wait, here's him. Hold on.
Blum, blum, blum. Blum, 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 blum.
Wait.
Blum, 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 blum. Blum, 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 blum. Ooh.
He's so happy. Are those purrs? Yes. He always purrs when he drinks, when he does the Slurpee, when he slurps the water. Is that on your Twitter? Yeah. Casual Bribery, thank you for the tier 4 sub. I think I said that. I don't know why I didn't close that. We have some linkers to get to. No, let's do all the non-linkers first. Look, it's Gordo. Thank you for the 7 Canadian. More like Kyle Pupinski. Should have hit him with that one. It would have been over. Jimmy Dore seems like the kind of guy who enjoys raisins in his butter tarts. Are you 50? What was? Yeah, let's go with that. I mean, I think anyone who enjoys raisins in anything is a psychopath anyway. So, what's a butter tart? Rivera Life, thank you for the tier 4 sub. I really appreciate that. Kyle was the step between MSNBC and Vosh in my leftward journey. I still like him and listen sometimes. Leftist pipeline for the win. How the fuck did Kyle Rittenhouse bridge MSNBC and myself for you? What did that even... Get it? The joke is that it's the other Kyle. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rivera Life. I appreciate it. Spock, can you save me with the $5? Kyle was the one who made Tulsi popular with the Joe Rogan podcast. How long ago? To be fair, Tulsi Gabbard didn't immediately lose her mind. The earlier behavior was better. She's completely changed. Mike H, thank you for the $5. That's true. Sake Tanuki with the 2 consecutive tier 1 subs. Am I crazy, or did we just gloss over the fact that Jimmy Dore was grifting for months before the TYT feud, and Kyle said the feud stopped him watching JD? Well, yeah, I think he was saying that, like, it you know, culminating into that big drama was what led him to stop. But no, I do strongly disagree with how he handled the Jimmy Dore Anna Kasparian situation, and I still think that his perspective is blinded by an unwillingness to come down too harshly on one side or the other. But I don't think it's like fundamentally because he's malicious or dishonest or anything like that, and he's definitely not a grifter. Big JM70, thank you for the tier 3 sub. Really appreciate that. Hey, great convo with Kyle. He got this Kentuckian into the left, and you've made me a socialist. Keep up the great work, both of you. Nice. I'll tell him so next time I see him. Thank you very much. Doctorino Sixerino, thank you for the 5. Really glad you enjoyed the convo. Thank you. Glad it gave you faith in the left. Antifa 666, is it Fred Meyer, Fred Myers, or Freddy's? Let's go with all 3. Hello?
He was eating, so be careful.
Who are you? Follow-up question, what are you? Chunky? Ooh. There we go. He's purring. Here. It's hard for me to wiggle myself over while holding him like this. There we go. Wow. Very good. Holly Fox 142 with the $5. Hey Vosh, I'm trans and otherkin / Therian, and I would love to elaborate on stream about the perspective of Therianthropism and otherkin perspectives. I appreciate that. You're probably better off sending me an email. I'm trying to move away from this relatively esoteric group of subjects. But I'd be happy to hear your perspective. I can't promise I'll agree though. If it has something to do with like your spirit or your vibe or your essence or whatever, this language tends to lose me a little bit. Greatcraft, either way, I love you. Greatcraft, thank you for the tier 2 sub. You're a fucking inspiration. Thank you, dear leader, for getting our dicks hard for freedom. Seriously though, thoughts on transhumanism? Good as long as it doesn't exacerbate a class divide. Sake, thanks the 2 gifted tier 1 subs. Do people who dye their hair red count as transginger? Yes. And real redheads are angry about it. Natural One Dragon, thank you for the $10. 10 smackers for the fat kitty. I love fat kitties. Yeah, that seems fair. Hold on. Got him. He's still purring. Unfortunately, the remainder of these donations are linkers, which it's hard to do with one hand to switch the scene elements. Hold on. Here, I'm going to do this. Okay. Wolfie Universe with the $5. Best Spider-Man meme. Don't know what the relevance of this is. Don't know if this is copyright. Can't even listen to the audio right now. Chat, just tell me how it is, okay?
Spider-Man! You're too late, Spider-Man! Weed has been legalized!
But you're the one getting smoked, Gummy!
Was it good? Did we do it? Chat seemed to like it. I'm just gonna gauge chat's response. Jason here, thanks for the gifted tier 1 sub. Hey Vosh, is this not just objectively correct? Oh my god, is this explosum? Is this cyanide and happiness? Do you know how long it's been since I've seen this? A helpful chart. Elections and bitching. The bad person won. I voted. You did everything you could and have earned the right to bitch. The bad person won. I didn't vote. You're not allowed to bitch because you did nothing to stop this. Shut up forever. The good person won. Today's a good day and you help. Relish in everyone else's bitching. You earned it, buddy. The good person won and you didn't vote. Luckily, things went okay this time, but maybe you should vote and stop being a bitch. I think it's, you know, it's quite direct, and I respect that. I won't deny it. Oh my god. Oh, he's starting to move. Yeah, that's a microphone cord. It's like an aux cord or something. No, not aux. It's something. I don't know. I feel like he can be held upside down with no problems for quite a long time. Yeah, do you want to bite the mic cord? Yeah? XLR cable, thank you. He's just purring. There you go. Wait, maybe if I pap him, he'll purr harder. Ooh. Okay. Nah, same volume as before. Oh, he wants to depart. All right, but we love you. All right, say goodbye. Tell them you love them. Ow! Mean. Violent baby. He's still purring so fucking hard, dude. Jiggle him? Okay. He just wants to bite me again. That's why he's looking at my face. Oh, yeah? Ooh.
Boss bad, boss bad, boss bad.
Be free. All right. Good content. There we go. Is this rotating? Here we go. Good thing I have a beard. Otherwise, that bite to the jaw would have hurt. He got through the hair. It's like a natural armor. NPC Porky with the $3. Jason Unruh was caught playing a rape mod for Fallout 4. Here's a link of the censored version. I saw this. I saw this on Twitter. How wild. Go to 530. You say it's a censored version, do you?
Unlike anything I've seen in a long time. Okay, so we're going to bring up the tweet. All right. So this is the tweet here. So Jason Unruh, care to explain?
Will this be censored?
We're going to throw that up there now.
I've literally seen this tweet that he's looking at, and it wasn't censored. But I guess Chud Logic put it up, so
we are going to need to have a little bit of censorship at an opportune moment. Okay.
Okay.
So hopefully this times correctly.
Hopefully
this works. If it doesn't work, it is what it is. Okay. Hopefully it works. Now let's watch.
I believe in Chud.
That's why I say these are random shit. All of these formats are just random. It's amazing, though. I think that most of the revenue for Facebook actually comes from the pandemic.
What is this gameplay?
Okay. So, okay. Let me just adjust this so you see what's happening there. Okay. Let's
Playing a dangerous game.
Let's just go for the sensor, okay? We're gonna send. I need you to see as much as possible of this, okay?
Whoa. That's not supposed to happen.
What happened?
I don't know how that happened.
What happened?
The game did something that it's not supposed
Oh, wow. How
to
did
do.
that happen? This is not appropriate for children, Jason. Holy shit.
No, that's not supposed to happen, and I don't know how it did.
Oh my God.
Jason's chat, thank you for your encouragement. I appreciate it. You gotta fix that shit, Jason.
Yep.
You have kids that are fans. Holy shit, one that was just on here. Oh man, YouTube's trying to fuck with you, bro.
No.
So it's like a rape mod, right? Like if there's a female bandit and they lose or whatever, it's like, oh, instead of surrendering, you can suck my dick or something. I'm guessing that's the context of the mod, right? Right? Oh, I don't know, Back Canary. It might not be on offer anymore. Any gender, but yeah, you can rape those you beat as a finisher, Vosh. Ah, interesting. He probably got as a mod from a mod pack, let's be real. I don't know if you can play a game and not notice that's a thing on offer. Even if that was part of a broader mod pack. And what mod pack are you downloading if it includes something like that? Yeah. The fact that it's another player is fucked. Wait, is it? Fallout 4 is single player. What do you mean it's another player? Isn't it just random NPCs? Yeah, it's just an NPC. Unless it's 76, which I don't think it was, because if it was, they would have fallen through the floor at some point during that shootout. Could have been an accident. I just think it's funny. I don't know. I just think it's funny. I'm not gonna condemn a person for. I mean, maybe I'll make fun of them for it, but like, this is a problematic Bethesda RPG game mod. This encourages sexual assault. Well, you can play as raiders in that game and fucking mutilate entire villages. Anyway. I think it's quite funny. It's a save file. He just forgot. Listen, can we talk about the thing that matters the most here? How fucked do you have to be to actually get off to sex mods in those games? That to me is just some insane shit, like some crazy degen shit. Like, are you just like playing the game normally, like getting the items and the leveling up, and then like, oh, now the titties are out, and then you just jerk off like then? Or do you not jerk off and just let that be part of the game experience? Just like randomly. How's that different than hentai? The difference is, hentai is something you look for specifically on its own, as opposed to you playing a video game and then every once in a while a flash of really bad hentai shows up. I think there's a huge difference there, you know? Yeah, I don't know. I just do not get it. I don't get it. I do not get it. I don't get it. I do not get it. Yeah. People who go to the strip club for their chicken tenders. Oh my god. Did Artemy fucking pierce the skin with his... Artemy. Who sharpened your teeth? Who sharpened your teeth? Yeah. See? Is that going to show up on the... Well, you can see the red tint. Well, death comes for us all. Imagine if I didn't have the beard armor. Oh, come on, don't you like to be teased by horrifically clipping 3D Bethesda models during grunting damage animations? Yeah, like, how do you get off to that? It's like, Bethesda games don't look great on their best days, okay? But then, like, how am I... Okay, 3D at, like, SFM pornography only recently got good enough to be worth jerking off to with Overwatch, okay? Prior to 2018, there was just no point. 3D pornography was a waste of time, okay? And that is with 3D pornography animations custom modeled and custom built with a lot of time put into it. Imagine you're just playing... What does it look like when you're playing, like, Fallout 4? It's just, like, two models with, like, a textured penis on it, and then they just, like, where's the artistry? Well, I can't come to that. That'd be like saying, you know, like, hey, do you want to see some naked bitches to come to? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, okay. And then they, like, hand me a pair of binoculars that I can use to look at a mirror, and the mirror's reflecting light where you can see, like, steamy breasts through, like, a like tessellated shower curtain or something. It's like really? This is what you're able to get off to? I feel like your imagination, geez, Artemy, didn't even hurt that badly. What are you, Artemy? What are you doing, Artemy? What are you doing? The hungry boy. Hold on, let me. I want to show blood on Twitch. Oh yeah, sorry guys. Whoops. Yeah, no more blood arena. There we go. We're fine. Yeah, I'm about to turn into a cat. Oh god, now my beard is wet. What the fuck? Okay, let me just wash my beard, okay? Just a second. I love him. Well, now half of my beard is still wet, but only because of water. I don't know why I didn't wash the full beard, but excuse me. Yeah, Sigvard, I'm just saying that it needs to be built properly. Bobert just keeps going. We'll cover the feud tomorrow. Okay. Nice. All right. I love Artemy. I'm glad that he defends himself. He's not even mad. He was purring when he bit me. He's just rowdy, dude. He's a rowdy fucking cat. I do get it though. From Artemy's perspective, you know? Because like cats play with each other like pretty rough because they're cats, you know, they're predatory animals. But I'm like 20 times his size. So he's got to think like he doesn't have to hold back against me, right? You know what I mean? Like if I was a cat and I looked up at me, a human, like I wouldn't think, "Oh, I better be careful with my bites." You know, I would think like, "Oh, he's completely indestructible. Let's go. Let's go hard." I can't blame him. You should have bit him to assert dominance. I would, but I don't like his fur in my mouth. Fur in mouth is meh. Sake, with the 2 gifted tier 1 subs. Artemy and Pigeon are the before and after of Vosh's Fit Ian arc. True. Except I'm just as hairy as ever. Yes, Atun Shea has some really good videos. Deepak is having you in the VS. What does that mean? Big floppa. Connor M, thank you for the $5. What's your opinion on Ireland and the ongoing conflict in the north? Do you think it should be unified? Principally, yeah, but at the end of the day, it'll come down to the citizens of Northern Ireland. Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 2 gifted tier 1 subs. Thank you so much for your kindness. It's the tanky pack. They commit horrific atrocities and claim they didn't see any decades later. True. Anyway, yeah, the fucking Unru's mod is very funny. Schlep in Life, thank you for the 2 gifted tier 1 subs. We need the Bing Chillin' emote. Yes, we do need a Bing Chillin' emote. That would be good. Yeah, there are a couple of emotes that we need to add, I think. Bing Chillin'. And Sake Tanuki with the 2 gifted tier 1 subs. Kek V, more like Dr. What is this? Oh, fucking course. Really? Surgeon and television personality Dr. Oz says he's running as a Republican for U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania. Of course. He's gonna win, too. Fucking... We need Dr. Phil, too. Get him up in there. Bricklayer, thank you for the gifted tier 1 sub. Our dude at the Green Corn Rebellion kicked off his political candidacy. Oh, shit, that's right. I need to talk to Gregory Harden. I've taken forever to respond to his email because I'm a cuck. Yeah, thank you for the reminder. Okay, I'll go back into the archives. I, had to do that. Goldenrod, thanks to $5. Dog, my computer has... My teacher got Destiny on her wall, WTF. What is this, YouTube Shorts? Why does it look like this? He DM'd me in a Discord invite recently so I can... No, I've got his email. It's okay. What was the earlier person saying about Deepak? I don't know, whatever. If it's important, I would know about it.
I thought a test rate.
What the fuck is he there?
Nah, bro. Hell nah. Like, yo, why the fuck our teacher got a picture of Destiny up here, bro? What the fuck?
It's like the creepiest picture. It's like the Coomer pic, too. It's like him looking at his monitor after ejaculating for the 8th time that day.
So, wait, can you say hi to the camera? Why she got Destiny up on there, man? I thought
Look for Jalise, the tier 1 sub. Look at my stupid baby. Oh my god, so stupid! Ooh, look at them. So dumb. Ooh. Spider baby. Alright, folks. I love you very much. I'll stream tomorrow morning. I'm still quite tired. You can probably see it in the lag in my responses. For those of you who are still watching, even through the donation responses, thank you very much for your kindness and your attentiveness. Like a good teacher, I reward attendance. And today's reward will be a brand new 2012 Chevy Outback delivered to all of your houses in real life. So I'll get right on that. I'll get right on that right after I end stream, okay? Everyone who's watching right now. Okay, let me see who I'm rating. I love you guys. All right. Oh man. Artemy. Let's raid Lance. The Surfs TV. Let's fucking go. Raid the Surfs TV. Alright, get on over there, folks. Have yourselves a good time. Rowdy, rowdy, howdy, howdy, rootin', tootin', pointin', shootin'. As they say. In Canada. That is a thing they say in Canada. They appropriated it from us. Yes. I'm a little sleepy. Oh, make sure to go watch the Giving the Uncucked Take, Neopronoun Xenogenders, Otherkin, and Other Things, which released to my channel before I started streaming this morning. I think it's a pretty nuanced video. I'm happy with it. I don't want to talk about it that much moving forward, just because it is a I think, fairly divisive and not entirely relevant subject for most people. But I strongly encourage you to give it a look, because I think I made some good arguments in there. Levy some, perspectives. Go forth and raid, my friends. I love you all very much. I will see every single one of you this time tomorrow. Earlier, actually, 11 a.m. PST tomorrow, which is not the current time. Take care, be well, and say hello to your dad for me. Because it's been a while since I've responded to his texts, and I think he's getting upset.